Okay, we're live here, everybody. Good afternoon. It's Wednesday, December 18th, and this is the Board of County Commissioners' regular meeting. And we've got additions and deletions to the agenda. Rich, you want to rattle those off?
I certainly can. First off, we're asking consideration for adding what is, if you agree, is item number 9, which would be an ordinance of the Board of Commissioners authorizing acceptance of Juniper Hill donation parcel. That was set and continued from December 4th. So it's now asking if we can go ahead and put that on. I believe you all have got the information, either electronically or in hard copy for that. The other item is an emergency ordinance, and we would like your consideration for that to be under 5B. And I don't know if if you want to preface that at all, or.
Sure. So this is a resolution approving an IGA with the town, Snowmass Village, for the collection of tobacco taxes. This IGA was just agreed on in the last 24 hours. So here it is.
And here it is. Okay.
So I will make, is there anything else?
That was it.
I will make a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
I'll second.
We have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, thank you. We're going to open this up to public comment now. It's the next part of our show. And we're going to give you 3 minutes each to make a comment. I want to say at the beginning of this, whoever wants to speak, at the beginning, I do have a commenter coming in. He's running late. He wanted to show us something, and I'll make it part of the last comment or commissioner comment if he gets here in time. That's John Doyle, who has his topographic 3D map of Aspen and Aspen Mountain that he wanted to show us briefly. So and I'm going to tee that up because he may burst through the door trying to get here in time. Okay, public comment. If anyone here would like to speak, please come forward and have a seat and tell us your name, and we'll get started.
Do you want me here?
Sure, that's fine. We just need a microphone. Make sure the mic's on.
Hello again.
Hi, Tulasi.
I'm Tulasi Wilkinson. And I was here on April 10th and made a statement. And in that statement, what I was doing is making an appeal once again to you and this community to help Jaya and me since, 6 years now? We became homeless after the taking of Smuggler Mountain. And at the end of that statement, Mr. Poshman said that we've heard you. So my question is, did you hear me? And the politics are getting very interesting now in the whole world, as you know. And when Greta Thunberg, our little 16-year-old who's standing up and teaching us all something, when she said to the adults that she was speaking to at the UN or wherever she was at the time, she said, "You said you have heard us. But if you have heard us and still do nothing to help change things, that would make you evil. And I'm not going to call you evil for what you did to my family. I won't do that. But I will call you cruel and mean, and I will do that. We've been homeless. We have not been able to get on our feet due to health problems and because we were targeted and our land was taken and you did everything. You, commissioners going back 35 years, did everything to destroy my family. My son has suffered tremendous chronic pain, and while we were camping out, and everybody knew it, and we were sleeping head to toe in the back of my Toyota 4Runner and barely eating, and appeals had been made and letters were going out to everyone and everybody in this community and John Ely, and no one ever reached out to us. So I'm here once again to ask you why you never ask the questions how we're doing. Why no one's ever reached out to us. You're allowing us to go down We are ill. We are homeless. We are living in the core right now, which everybody knows is a disaster as far as air quality goes. We're in a basement where all the bus fumes come in. And that's not good after I've had Lyme disease. And it's not good after my son and I have been homeless. You want to meet Jaya? You think Wilk was something. Jaya's amazing. And you've done everything to destroy this boy. And he's 40 years old right now, and he needs help.
Tulasi, that's 3 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And if you ever want to talk to me or have the guts to talk to me, I'll talk to you anytime.
Thank you for coming. Okay, public comment. Is there anyone else here like to please come up? Lee? Welcome.
My name is Lee Mulcahy, and I would like to wish everyone a Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy New Year. Since I think the next public meeting is January 4th or something like that. 8th. Oh, 8th, okay. As you guys know, I'm very, very grateful for many things, but I think as a community that we don't want to go down this road again with this tragedy that occurred with Tulasi and Wilk's family. Jim True was the county commissioner at the time, our current city attorney, and he bulldozed their home. And destroyed a family. And we're still dealing with the repercussions today. And I hope that you will not destroy my family. The sheriff was, I'm so grateful to County Commissioner Kelly, my neighbor, for reaching out and in community and love and visiting us with Mom and I at the house today. I'm sorry, I'm disappointed that the sheriff had decided to cancel. Mom arranged that all around his schedule at the last moment. I want to talk about not me, but let's talk about we. And two things. First is APSHA's, and I don't know if you're aware of this, but about 1/3 of APSHA's units are RO, and many of them have this clause in, notwithstanding any provision. Here to the contrary, the app shall have the right in its sole discretion to acquire any property or unit. What that means is that's willy-nilly. That's not the American dream of home ownership. That's communism. It's in our deeds. We tried to get it removed, but Jim True was resistant. It's the American nightmare because basically what it means is who is next. You may be a troublemaker. Lester Crown may not love your family. Well, bam, you're out. And the other thing, second point, is about the we, not the me, is in October of 2015, APSHA removed, as you are well aware, and I complain about this, bi-weekly, they removed the 60-day cure period. On October 12th of 2015, they sent out a 3-page newsletter. I'll submit it to the county, but they fail to mention, they say, on the guideline changes. In the 3 pages going over the guideline changes, they fail to mention they removed the 60-day cure period. Why? For the first time in 7 years, APSHA changed the rules in October, but failed to mention the deputy director in a letter to all of us that they were removing the 60-day cure period because they were getting ready to sue on that and they had screwed up the guideline. So I think that's unfortunate. And then lastly, Greg, do I have how many seconds?
You're over 5 seconds.
Oh,
You're done.
okay. Well, listen, Merry Christmas, everyone, and I'll see you January 8th. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good holiday. Okay, public comment.
This is Mom Whisper.
Okay, I don't see any other hands up. Hey, John, you got here just in time. You're on.
What is he doing? That's pretty cool.
Give you a minute to get ready, or whatever you need there. Come on down. You made it.
Okay, yeah, that was hectic.
How's the Novocaine?
Yeah,
Okay, tell us who you are and what can you do? I'm giving you 3 minutes.
great. I'm John Doyle. Nice to see you all. I created this map, 3D map of Aspen Mountain, because I thought it was important for you, the Board of County Commissioners, to get a better idea of the zoning and what's going on the backside. It's made from a map that I got from Pickens County GIS, so it has the most current information on it. And it's got lifts, private property, Forest Service land, buildings, roads, water features, 60-foot contours. It measures 3 miles wide by 5 miles long is the scale of it. And I did draw in the Pandora's lift.
I can't be in the room if you're gonna talk about that.
That's all I have to say
It's
about
very
it.
cool.
But I think it's actually a really valuable tool, and frankly, I'm surprised we don't have one yet.
We don't usually ask questions. Is that all you want to tell us? What else can you tell us about it? You can tell us how you made it or something like that. Then I'm gonna close it down and we'll take it to commissioner comment. But
It's something everybody that goes to architectural school learns how to do, is create a small elevation of where a building's going to go. And I've just taken that process and expanded it dramatically. But basically, you cut out each contour, glue what you've cut out onto a piece of foam core, and then you trace the next contour onto the next piece of foam core, and so on. There's 62 levels.
How long did it take you?
A
long time.
About a month and a half of 4 or 5 hour days.
and you can leave this with us for a little bit.
Green is national forest, white is private property and or open space.
Wow.
Wow, fantastic. You're gonna leave it here so we can get a glance at it, and then
I don't want to be responsible for it if we're leaving it in this room.
I don't want anybody to be responsible for it.
Yeah, it's too,
Okay.
Yeah, it's pretty fragile. I'd like to get a case made for it,
Yeah.
so, because it could be stained or broken pretty easily.
I'd like the commissioners all to get a look at it before it leaves today, maybe at our
Absolutely.
break or something. So,
Sounds good.
all right, thanks for bringing it in. Thanks for the rushing to do that. I knew you wanted to get in here. We're gonna shut down the public comment, or at least I've got to solicit more, and then,
can we, because I don't know what's going to happen at today's meetings, is there any way we can put it in the room next door where it's secure? I just would hate to see it we don't know what's going to be happening. We have a really busy schedule today.
we could do that, then it'd be under lock
I
and
think
key.
that'd be
Dale's
safer.
gotta
Well, I was gonna suggest the open space conference room.
But if we can just take it next door, if that room's available.
Yeah, I can check on that for you.
Yeah.
Okay, you guys can
Just
work
so
on
it's
that.
safe.
I'll just
I'm gonna
hang out.
continue my meeting. I want to see if there's any other public
So
comment.
just a quick comment on that. I look forward to exploring that, just as I enjoy exploring on foot. This will be a lot easier than exploring on foot to
Right,
get a
it's,
feeling for some of the areas that.
it definitely, there's a lot more going on there than looking at a flat map.
Okay, we gotta keep moving. Thank you. Got it. Thanks for
Thanks, John.
starting the ball rolling.
And just
Appreciate
check
it.
with Rich outside to see if we can move it next door, John.
Is this our present? Is this our, no?
Man, we're-
Okay, public comment. We're still open for public comment. If somebody would, we have one. Okay, I'm gonna give you 3 minutes like everyone else. Welcome, please tell us your name.
Ziska Childs, and just a comment as to the fabulous topographic model you've got here. At very least, would it be possible to take photographs and put them on the county website? So that, I mean, it would be best if it were, in fact, a 3D photograph all the way around it. But if nothing else, you can take front elevations of each side, straight down, and so that most of the rest of us that don't have, I want to spend time with that thing, but yeah, let's at least document and photograph it and make that public. Thank you.
Great, thanks for your comment. Public comment, anybody else here to make a public comment? Seeing none, I'm gonna close it down and bring it back for board comment.
I just
Patty.
really quick want to wish everyone a wonderful holiday season coming up here. We have this week till Christmas, and we have Hanukkah, and we have New Year's, and we have lots of fun and beautiful snow, and it's going to get cold again, so please be safe out there, and please be very, very cautious going out into the backcountry. We have severe avalanche risks. There's a young man whose life was saved over in Steamboat Springs by the grace of God, so we want to be very careful out there. So please enjoy and have a wonderful 2020.
Thank you. Steve, did you have anything else you wanted to add to the?
Kind of the same message, just wishing everybody a happy and a safe holiday season. There are lots of icy places on the roads that the conditions are not ideal. In the back country, it doesn't take much of a hillside to slide to bury somebody and kill them, so be extremely cautious anywhere in the back country. The snow is unstable right now. I want everybody to have a good time, but do it safely.
George?
So, this is coming into the crazy season. This morning, like pretty much every morning, cars are backed up by the Aspen airport, and that was even at 10 o'clock. So pretty much from 7 in the morning till probably around 11 a.m. in the morning, cars are backed up at the Aspen airport. Last night on a bus, it probably took me a half hour to get out of town. Traffic was backed up to the Hotel Jerome, and so it's a little crazy. I think coming into the holiday season, we need to have people to be patient, enjoy being here in Aspen, but we have alternatives in terms of trying to get in and out of town. We've got a great bus system. We've got now 8 electric buses that are running around town to try to reduce our carbon footprint, and they're quieter. And I would just encourage people to think about changing their modes of transportation. I know some people have to utilize a car to get in and out of town, but there's many that don't. And certainly most of our guests do not need cars to come in and out of town. It's a free bus system between Aspen and Snowmass. And I would just encourage everyone to think about maintaining our pristine climate here, our clean air, our nice skies, do whatever we can to try to reduce our carbon footprint. Climate change is not a hoax, like some people think in Washington, and there are ways that we can try to mitigate it. So the traffic will be like this probably for the next 2 weeks, but let's see if everyone tries to think about a different way to get in and out of town, we may make a difference. So thank you. Happy holidays.
Thanks, George. Kelly?
Sure. On the same theme, some of you know that I have been a waitress on and off since I was 13 and several years here in town also. And, you know, this is a time of year where not everybody gets to spend a lot of time with their families because they are working 7 days a week and trying to make the money that they can during the busiest time of our year. And, you know, so just a reminder for people to be kind and, you know, to people who are working in service and be a little patient if they can't help you or get to you right away, and recognize that, you know, they might wish to be having fun and spending time with their family and loved ones too and not able to right now.
Nice thought.
Great, nice thought. I just wanted to back up what George said. As I was coming into town today, I was carpooling, so I did drive. I think about it every time I do. I saw the electric bus, and the electric bus was working the route from Maroon and Castle, and it was so great to see that. So just want to encourage everyone to get on the bus as often as they can, and I will promise to do the same. Thank you. I think if that's it for commissioner comment, we're going into consent items. We've got the minutes of the regular meeting of December 4th. I need a motion or a discussion.
I'll move to approve.
We have a motion
Second?
and a second. Any conversation on that? I don't see any. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, next we have a resolution amending the BOCC Resolution 06-2019 and reappointing Airport Vision Committee Community Advisory members for the ASC Vision Public Outreach process. And Rich?
Sure, I can make a quick comment on that. Back in January of this year, the board appointed the 116 members to serve in a capacity on either a community character group, a technical working group, the airport experience group, and a focus group. In October, on the 2nd of October and then December 5th, those particular working groups have now reported out to the Visioning Committee. And so now the Visioning Committee is going to take that information and start formulating their recommendations. To start this off, all these terms were set for 1 year, and so they're set to expire. And the plan is that they're going to, the Visioning Committee, which we're asking you to reappoint or to extend their terms, will be working through probably the end of March. So we're asking the board to consider just extending their terms through the 31st of March.
I have a question.
Patty?
Is this okay with the members of these committees?
Yes.
Okay. I wanted to make sure that they're comfortable with that because we so appreciate their help and all the time and great deal of time and energy they've put in. I really can't tell them enough how much we thank them.
It was a heavy lift. They've
and they
just
were
all
great,
done just
and
an
they took it to
exceptional
heart.
job.
Yeah.
Steve?
I had several questions. I was wondering, of the 25 Vision Committee members, have any of them quit attending? So there's fewer than 25 at this point?
Well, you know, their work hasn't really begun in full earnest yet. But they've had a really heavy attendance. The only one that I know of was Mr. Cuniff, who was on it to begin with, stepped aside because of potential conflict. Other than that, the meetings I've attended, they've been well attended. So.
And then, posing a question to the board, I was wondering if it would be appropriate to consider appointing somebody to the board at this point who wasn't on it previously. Just as an example, a person whose stature has changed since we made appointments in January was that Torrey was elected mayor of Aspen. He served on one other committee. Perhaps he should be considered to be added to the Vision Committee. And
I'm quite comfortable with the status of where these people have been and been working for a year, rather than trying to move anybody around now without having them in front of us and asking them if they want to be moved around. I mean, if anybody wishes to do that, they could come forward, but without having them present here, I would rather just move this along and get this established till March.
Yeah, we went through a fairly lengthy discussion in terms of when we first appointed. We had a tremendous response from the community, which was great in terms of interest. And we had to actually figure out to try to maintain a reasonable group size, appointed people that we felt were provided a wide representation of our community in terms of interests, in terms of professions and backgrounds. And these committees, I want to thank them all. They have worked diligently over this past year, attended numerous meetings. Some were open to the public. Many were presented via panels with experts brought in from out of town. And so to think about switching people at this point, at this late stage, the Vision Committee has been meeting, even though the work hasn't started in earnest. They've been meeting and discussing. So that group is intact. They've got some group dynamics. And I think it would be extremely disruptive to try to add or subtract people at this late stage. So I would be opposed to that idea. But I do want to really thank all the committee members that did spend this past year many, many hours, a lot of work. I look forward to seeing their majority and the minority reports that will be forwarded on to the Vision Committee. And the Vision Committee really now has a chore of looking at all those different viewpoints from these different committees and try to then come up with a recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners for us to then have a public discussion in terms of how we want to try to move forward or not move forward on the airport. And I think that will probably happen in the first quarter. So I look forward to that. I want to thank the Vision Committee because we're appointing them for another year, perhaps. Is there a time frame on this?
Yeah, just through the end of March.
Through the end of March, so another
they're hoping to-
several months more.
Like that's
And
their
then there's
commission.
March, we can
This has
Commission.
been,
You
this
could
is
reappoint again.
we'll probably mention this again, but it's been a tremendous public process I think the county's undertaken in terms of looking at what is certainly one of our key assets in this community, which is the Aspen-Pickett County Airport. So I want to thank them all for their work and the Vision Committee for continuing on for the next few months.
One further comment. I suspected that the board probably would not want to change the makeup. I just wanted to pose that question. And I looked at that March 31st deadline, which well, what if their work takes longer than that? But that would be an impetus to them to get their work done before then, too.
Yeah, and again,
Hopefully, they'll be able to
Always continue.
accomplish that.
they've committed to meet once a week after the first of the year. They're really excited about the opportunity now, and so they're going to really put it to the road here. So we'll see. And if not, I mean, we'll come back to the board for an extension of those terms. And to your comment, Steve, Tori was on the focus committee that I facilitated and provided great input, and so was involved in that part of it. So just wanted to make a note there. So he was engaged.
Are we being too optimistic with March? But we thought this process would probably have ended by now. But we can always extend, as you said. Just if we want to save ourselves the labor, if we want to give them a little leeway. But that may be dangerous. Kelly.
Yeah, and I'll just note, this is probably the biggest phase of the public outreach, but the next phase, when these discussions come to us, also open up opportunity for public input. So anyone who maybe had wanted to serve on a committee or came late to the discussion or wasn't on the final vision committee but sat on one of the other committees will still be invited to weigh in as an individual member of the public for us to consider as well.
Great, thank you. Thanks for that reminder. I wanted to just say, looking for the resolution, the bylaws for the committee, we have a section on conflict of interest, which is fairly straightforward and I think comprehensive. I understand we've had one member recuse themselves because of a conflict. I know in the community there have been suggestions that people have conflicts of interest, and I just want to point out that I think we have a fairly clear definition of what that would mean in our bylaws, and that we'll all reserve the right to be asking questions about that if we see fit as the process goes forward.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I make a motion to approve.
Second?
We have a motion, a second, further discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Okay, moving right along. Thanks for that, Rich.
You're welcome.
Next, we have a resolution designating the official agenda posting place. This could be the most important thing we do all year for the calendar year 2020. Jeanette, are you going to tee this up for us?
I can make a comment. This is something that is required pursuant to statute, that we designate the official agenda posting place every year by January 1st. Even if it wasn't required, we'd probably do it as a courtesy to our public, and the agendas are also, of course, on the website. But this is the official designation of the posting place, which will be out here in our lobby.
Right outside our door,
Right
on the
outside
wall
our
outside the door.
wall.
Right.
For many, many, many years, it was the courthouse. And last year, you all approved having it moved over here because this is where our meetings are held now, and so we're asking that it continue.
Okay, any comment, any questions? Steve?
Just for the public to know, that outside door is not locked, and if they could get in to look at that bulletin board at any hour, so the building doesn't have to be open for business to look at our agenda.
Yeah, good point.
Got it. Okay, I'm looking for a motion.
So I'll make a motion to approve this resolution.
Steve and
I'll second.
Patty seconding, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Moving right along, Ann Driggers is in the house. Certification of mill levies for the 2019 property taxes collected in 2020. Welcome. What does this mean?
This is a pretty big deal for everybody in Pekin County because this is where we certify the mill levies for all of the districts, municipalities, and Pekin County itself, which enables the treasurer to collect property taxes and distribute those revenues to all of those districts and municipalities. So I'd like to introduce Sid Tovney, who is our Chief Deputy Treasurer and has actually done all of the work that's presented before you. You have in your hand, I believe, this voluminous document with a ton of numbers on. We are unable to provide it to you until this morning because state statute requires the districts and the municipalities to certify their mill levies before giving them to you, and the date for that is December 15th. So really we're collecting all of this information yesterday and the day before, verifying it, inputting it into the spreadsheet, which, as you can tell from looking at it, is a significant amount of work. So I want to recognize Sid and thank her for that, because it's a tremendous responsibility and takes a lot of time, and it is very detailed work. So
Thank you, Sid, on
Thanks,
behalf
Sid.
of the board and the county and the rest of us. Thank you so much. Looks like it's hard work. Hard work. How do you do it?
I feel like you're poking your eye out with a stick sometimes. So we take it in turns. So a state statute requires that by the 22nd, you certify the mill levies as submitted to you by each of the districts and municipalities within Pitkin County. And then we provide that information to the state and also to the assessor, whereby it then gets turned into the property tax bills that are sent out. So this is the information presented before you. One thing that I did want to mention, as you may have read in the newspaper, there was an error or a correction made in the assessed valuation as provided by the assessor. So that did provide some kind of last minute changes for some entities. So that has been, we have additionally verified in that and the number that was presented to some of the districts and Pitkin County initially has changed, but it is all correct in this document right now. So,
And it's my understanding that you were the sharp eye who caught that, and I want to thank you for doing so.
thank you.
We appreciate that.
I was very
I didn't hear
excited
that.
because I thought our revenues were going to go up significantly, so it's already trying to figure out how we might spend it. Might just check that first.
Well done.
So
Steve?
I really appreciate it that we have the right figures here and we don't have to call it a special meeting, because we're all assuming this is our last meeting of this calendar year and that we'll see each other in January. But if we had to call a special meeting, then we'd all have to come back in again. So hopefully this is our final deal today and we get it right like we have done every other previous year since I've
Right.
been on the board.
Well, state statute does require that each of the districts, including yourselves as representing Pitkin County, the organization, have approved your mill levies, which you have done. And so they have all done that by December 15th. And so those are the numbers that we're certifying before you today.
I have a question. What's our county number? In the top corner of this
That's the
document.
resolution number.
Oh, that's, okay.
But
That
we have
means
to
we
do it
a
on a
county number?
form. Well, actually, I don't know. It might be a state thing. This is the state's
Okay.
form.
I was thinking we're probably county number 1, right?
54.
Yeah.
54, isn't it?
I think it's 49.
Oh, see, I was hoping we were number 1 and not 64.
The
Thank you,
The
thank you.
license place used to have us as 54, back before ZG. You remember that?
Some of us don't go back. You weren't here then.
I was probably about, I'm not sure when it switched over.
Yeah, no.
It's lore. Well, thank you. Any other questions? Steve?
How many different taxing districts are there in this document we have? There's a lot of them. I don't want to add them up, but
I haven't ever counted.
there's a
lot.
there's a whole lot of different districts that there's a
Right.
separate mill levy for each one. And Pitkin County is only one of many.
Correct, and it's only
Most of the
Pitkin County's
taxes
a small
collected go
portion
to
of-
other entities
Yeah.
besides Pitkin County, actually.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then, when we're actually in the process of collecting all of the property taxes on behalf of these districts and then distributing them, we manage that in a system within the treasurer's office as well as in finance as well. So there's an awful lot of accounting that goes on for the actual collection and disbursements. So this represents a huge amount of work and, the primary responsibility of the treasurer in any county in Colorado.
Well, we're glad you're doing it. Thank you. And not.
And thanks for your time.
us. Yeah, thank you so much. Are we ready for more questions?
Yeah. Since this is the first time ever I'm seeing this, my question is, so just under the county, our total all fund, once the levy and the credits have been calculated, is $25 million.
Which page are you looking at?
4.
Page 4.
So if I, to interpret this, of our $141 million budget, 25 million of it is coming from property tax and the rest is other revenue sources of the county.
Correct.
Okay, so I just want to kind of pull that out a little bit because sometimes property taxes get a real focus for, our funds, and want to point out that actually the bulk of our funds is not coming from property.
Correct, yeah. As you went through the budget process, you would seen, we have the airport obviously receives no property tax, the landfill. We have a large amount of revenue that comes from sales tax, as well as other government grants, federal and state grants.
Yeah.
Fees, treasurer fees, actually. The collection of the property taxes that we're about to do nets over $4 million for Pitkin County itself in treasurer's fees that we earn on those transactions.
Yeah. So. Okay. Thank you so much, Ann.
Great.
And Sid, thank you.
Okay. I'm looking for a motion.
So I'll move to approve the certification of mill levies for 2019 property taxes.
I will second.
Kelly seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great.
Thank
Sid,
you. Thanks,
take
Sid.
a great holiday. Great. Same to you, Ann.
Thinking about
Have a
you,
good,
Sid.
take a rest. We know you need. Thank you so much. Okay, we're moving on to individual consideration items. First reading set for public hearings on January 8th. Up first, an ordinance authorizing acquisition of the Cora May loads 1 and 2. And Dale Will is teed up and in the chute and ready to go.
Yeah. Map going on up here. I'm Dale Will, the acquisition manager for Pitkin County Open Space and Trails, and I'm here to request your consideration of a county purchase of the Cora May loads 1 and 2. There are 2 adjacent mining claims that were merged into a single parcel of about 20 acres. They're shown on this map surrounded by the yellow line. And this is a great example of how a parcel can really be more than what's contained within its boundaries. This is a section of Richmond Ridge, and I was just looking at John Doyle's map next door. He didn't go quite this far up the valley, otherwise I would have brought it back in here. But the open space program has really sometimes struggled to know quite how to work with Richmond Ridge because there's a lot of cabins in some locations. But this is a spot where there's a nice pie piece here from the ridge all the way down to the river. That has been protected by a series of things. You can see all this gray area up above. That was land that the Pepke's protected through TDRs, about 650 acres up there. And then coming down the slope, there's the Sterling Cooper open space that we bought about 10 years ago from Buzz Cooper, and he wanted that to be a memorial site for his son Sterling, and the Cooper family has always wanted us to have an easier trail onto the Sterling Cooper open space. The current route to get onto it comes off of the junction of Little Annie Road here, and there's a trail that's terrible. It goes straight up the fall line, and people use it, but it's not a good trail. So the Cora May loads are fascinating to us because, number one, they contribute to this swath of land on Richmond Ridge that's been spared development. And secondly, there's an old trail of some kind, an old grade that I think dates back to the mining era. We've never figured out exactly who built it, but it does seem to weave around the bases of a lot of different tailing piles and things as it works its way along the slope on Richmond Ridge. And it runs from the Cora May over to the Sterling Cooper open space. It's depicted on this red line here, through a little slice of national forest. It's not a designated trail in the national forest, but it's open to the public for recreation on the national forest by foot and horse traffic, just the way it is. So the purchase of the Cora May loads would connect a trail. You can see this black line here is a driveway that goes up to the Cora May loads off of Castle Creek Road, and that's subject to a Forest Service permit. Gary just spoke to the new district ranger yesterday, Kevin Riordan, and he said that it wouldn't be a problem for us to assume the benefits of that driveway permit, and that as far as the forest is concerned, the use of this grade can occur with no other action. There was a development site approved, believe it or not, right about where this little hand is, and that was approved with a requirement for avalanche mitigation. It was approved for a really big house, I think 8,500 square feet or something like that, with a big wall for the avalanche mitigation, which would be visible from a long reach of Castle Creek Road. So it's a property that Hawk Greenway first brought to the attention of the Open Space Board probably 5 years ago, and Hawk championed it. I'm happy to see him here today to see how a seed that he planted long ago has finally come to fruition. We chased after it years ago and were outbid by Tom Barron, who bought the property intending to pursue a development on it. And Tom, thankfully, has decided not to do that and to sell it to us for what he paid for it, plus a little bit for his transaction costs he's had. The purchase price he's agreed to, $1.25 million, is his purchase price several years ago, plus his costs on holding the property. So we appreciate Tom being able to come down quite a bit off of his listing price and make this available to us. The Open Space Board has unanimously recommended that you purchase this, and the staff also recommends that you approve this on first reading and move it along to second reading in January.
Thanks, Dale. Questions? Steve?
Dale, I know that you would be doing a management plan for the property, but presumably we would consider having a parking area using the existing road going to this, and then that would be a parking area for people who then would be going along the red trail to the Sterling Cooper open space. Is that what your thinking is on it?
Well, you're absolutely correct. I don't get to decide the management. I just work on the acquisitions, and we do have a team upstairs that looks at those plans. But from a physical standpoint, what you're saying makes a lot of sense. Where this building site was approved, there's space there to park, I estimate, 5 cars. There's a flat area that was scooped out probably with a bulldozer at the top of that driveway. If the powers that be would like to activate that for use from a physical standpoint, it's sitting there ready to be used.
Mm-hmm. George?
So Dale, we could almost consider this, or maybe it is an in-holding in the National Forest.
Definitely.
And so similar to what Open Space has been able to do up 100 Creek Valley, purchased and extinguished development rights on a lot of these little in-holdings up 100 Creek Valley, which has really protected that area from not only new built development, but year-round access, which was even more critical for up there. Similar situations here.
I'm just curious, there's this another, looks like another in-holding just to the right of that.
Does that parcel have any development rights on it, do you know?
I don't believe that it does, and I think the access to that parcel would be extremely difficult. Whoops, I didn't mean to draw on
Just
here.
did it. Uh-oh.
I'll make that
Somebody
go away,
just lost
hopefully.
some property.
There we go. This area here is extremely steep, and we've talked about that upstairs, just speculating the only way you could possibly get to that parcel would be to come down off the road up on top, and it's certainly one that we will be attempting to make contact with the owner to see if we could protect that property as well.
Great, thanks.
Question?
I just have a statement.
Go ahead.
I think this is, we've been talking with the Cooper family for many, many, many years. And in honor of Sterling Cooper, open space, they've always wanted to have some great public access. So I think this fits into that perfectly. And Dale, thank you for your efforts. And Huck, thank you for bringing it to our attention. And thanks to Tom, who sent us a great letter. And we appreciate his thinking about letting it come back into the hands of Pickens County.
Ditto on that. Yeah, thank you, Hawk, for your vision on identifying this early on, and for Dale for your work on getting it, and Tom as well. I'd like to know, you've got two little roads in there. I see one's Richmond Hill, and the other one to the west of the road on the upper right side of that map is labeled, but I can't read it here. But I guess my question is, the connectivity from Sterling Cooper to the top of the ridge.
It's Upper Hurricane.
It's up through Hurricane. Is that what the road? It's Upper Hurricane Road.
And then above that is Richmond.
I'm just
Richmond Hill.
wondering, is there connectivity to our other trails beyond the Sterling Cooper open space that you can identify in this map, or maybe not?
I've never tried to scramble up that hillside. I wish we had the 3D map depiction for this location. I think it's probably pretty steep, and another issue there is that when the TDRs were pulled on all this land up here, there's a covenant that does not allow development, and I think trails are deemed to be a type of development under the county's code. So whether we could connect our way up that hill would be something we would have to explore and come back to you.
So this is really one way in and out for us, and this is an essential connection to that open space.
There is a physical trail that runs through the Sterling Cooper open space and finds its way up, to the north, and intersects Little Annie Road way up in Little Annie Basin. Huck and I and others have walked that thing for years. In fact, you may recall Huck donated a trail easement on a piece of land that connects on that trail off of Little Annie Basin. I didn't show it on this map because it crosses some properties where we don't yet have trail easements, and I didn't want to stir anyone up to go exploring where they maybe shouldn't. There is a possibility of connecting this trail to Little Annie Basin on more of a traverse.
Got it. And can you just give us a sense of scale? How far is it from? How long is the red line mark there from this new acquisition to the open space?
Let's see. I can do better than. I can't quite read the scale over here.
It says 1,000 feet. The whole thing's 1,000. So it's probably.
So it looks like maybe a half mile from
half-mile trail,
Cormay to Sterling Cooper, something like that.
Right.
And it's a lovely walk. The views of Mount Hayden, it's just in your face right there. So
right.
It's something I think a lot of people enjoy. It's very gentle.
Can't wait to see it. I'm looking for
I'd be happy to make a motion to approve a first reading, and this will be a public hearing when?
January 8th.
January 8th.
January 8th.
I'll second.
Do a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thanks again, Hawk.
Right. Thanks, Hawk. Thanks, Dale. Thanks,
Come
Tom,
back on the
wherever
8th
you
and
are.
see us.
Looking forward to exploring that. Thanks for coming in, Dale. Up next, item number 5B, one of the new items on our agenda is the IGA with Snowmass Village for collection of tobacco tax. And Connie's here.
Connie, we had an amendment to the agenda. Just scoot over. You don't have to go anywhere.
Oh, sorry.
You could,
Jump.
you could
I thought
handle
you were
that
gonna
one too,
I thought
Connie.
you were
if
gonna
want.
help with this.
All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and do this.
Rise to it,
I
okay.
was handed it this morning, so I'm gonna ask Ann to come up because I guess she was instrumental in putting together the framework of this. This is an emergency resolution of the Board of County Commissioners of Pitkin County, Colorado, approving an intergovernmental agreement between the Board of County Commissioners of Pitkin County and the Town of Snowmass Village for the provision of use tax collection. This is an emergency ordinance, so if the board adopted it today, it would be effective upon adoption. Confirmatory reading, I'd propose that be January 8th, 2020. The impetus for doing this as a emergency ordinance is the IGA as drafted is set to be effective January 1st. And this is all an outgrowth of resolution number 65, 2019, where you all posed a question to impose additional sales tax on the sale of tobacco and nicotine products in Pitkin County. Essentially what this does is the IGA authorizes the Town of Snowmass Village to collect the sales tax for us, both in Snowmass Village and in unincorporated portions of Pitkin County. And in connection with doing that, we will provide them with a 5% of all taxes collected. The county attorney's recommendation is that you adopt this today and set confirmatory for January 8th, 2020. I'm happy to answer any questions you have, and Ann's here as well. She probably knows more about it than I do.
Great. Thank you. Patty?
And Snowmass has already approved it, or they're set to before the 1st?
I believe they are going to consider it next week.
So it'll be done before the 1st?
Yes.
And they'll do it on an emergency. I don't know if they have a single read or a 2 read.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Okay. And then the city of Aspen will collect it for the sales tax, county tax that's generated from sales in the city, right?
There will be no sales tax within the city. It's just unincorporated Pitkin County. And because Snowmass does not have its own
that's why, 'cause
tobacco
city has
tax,
a tobacco
they
tax.
can collect it. And the reason why, so that's the reason why Snowmass is our partner in this. Pitkin County does not have a sales tax collection function because the state collects all sales taxes on our behalf with the exception of tobacco taxes. And so therefore, given that Snowmass Village was going to collect the tobacco tax and already has a sales tax collection department or function, I worked with them to have them do it on our behalf.
And then this will include, I think we talked about this briefly yesterday, this will include those areas of basalt that are in Pitkin County. If there's any tobacco sales tax generated, I'm not sure if there's retail in that part of basalt that's in Pitkin County. Okay.
There's something like 10 retail establishments in the county, as I understand.
I was under the impression that John Ely was looking into whether we could actually collect over and above the tobacco tax that Basalt already is collecting.
Basalt does have, I didn't, so that
Basalt
was
has
one.
their own tobacco tax. It's not
So that
quite
would be
as
the
much
same
as ours.
situation as with the city of Aspen.
Correct.
Probably. Okay, just want to clarify, we're covering all of this since we need to get it done by the 1st, and this is our last meeting.
Right.
And this includes vaping, nicotine products is
all
included
nicotine.
in this.
All of those that are permitted or required by state statute.
Until now, the state didn't have a collection of nicotine or vaping products, were untaxed, as I understood it. Is that correct? Unregulated, untaxed.
I'm not sure about all the legalities of the state law.
I don't believe they're collecting any tax on vaping until now.
No.
So, question?
Yes, for a point of clarification, there's several places in here that say use tax, and I wonder if we need to amend that to say sales tax, or if
I think so.
is that correct?
We Snowmass also collects use tax in Snowmass Village on our behalf, and I think that the IGA was just kind of
Transposed.
duplicate, and so wherever it says use tax in here should read sales tax.
Okay, good.
Good
Thank
catch.
you.
Make sure the changes are made.
Thanks, Kelly, good catch.
Okay. So, I'm looking for a motion.
This is an emergency ordinance, so it comes back to us, and that means it takes effect immediately upon passage today, comes back to us for a confirmatory reading on the January 8th, and that's when public comment occurs. So I'll make a motion to approve today to move forward.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Can I just make one,
Oh,
just a
comment?
further clarification from Patty? The tax collection is effective January 1st.
Right.
It is.
But this ordinance technically becomes effective today for tax collection January 1st, which I think is outlined in the ordinance.
Though the process is the retailers do not have to submit their tax return until the 20th of the month following. So I think we have plenty of wiggle room in there, though obviously to have it
Good.
done by the 1st is great.
Sure. Great.
Right.
Planning ahead.
And I'd like to thank the town of Snowmass Village for doing this for us, because
Yeah.
otherwise I'd have to stand up a tax collection function, which is additional personnel.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
We appreciate Snowmass. I appreciate that.
And the reason why we did the 5% is that's what the treasurer charges per state statute to all others for revenue collection. So it seemed to make sense
Fair.
that they did the same
compensated.
to us.
We appreciate the partnership with Snowmass Village.
I'm going to call this. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming in. Up next, under individual consideration items, this is public hearing, second reading. We have a resolution approving the fourth quarter budget supplementals, and Connie was waiting for us.
Good afternoon. So today we have the second reading of the fourth quarter supplementals. This resolution increases the county's 2019 budgeted expenditures by $7,827,953, and that is offset by an increase in budgeted revenues of $7,470,533. That makes a net increase in budget of $357,420. Now, while these amounts seem like a lot, please remember that $4.9 million of the total in both expenditures and revenues are a net zero change that has to do with our transition to our new ERP and moving different items from one fund to another or one count to another as we've made this transition. And then another $2.1 million of the request is in transit sales tax that the county passes through to City of Aspen, Snowmass Village, and RAFTA. So $7 million of these total amounts are not anything new, no new projects, no new real expenditures. It's just changes in budgeting. So numbers look big, but the impact is not that big. So very briefly, I'll just go through the different requests. The first one is in the jail, and it is for an increase in hospital services, physician services, and medical supplies. As you know, the county jail is responsible for paying medical costs for inmates while they are in the jail, and they cannot always anticipate certain cases that might require a more extensive hospital stay or specialized services. So this increases the budget by $100,000 to cover those costs that the jail has incurred. The next request is for our ERP and the annual maintenance fee. This was an oversight that we did not include the annual maintenance fee in the 2019 budget. There is a double up in 2019 between our old systems and the new, and then we will see savings in 2020, about $60,000 in savings the following year. Next, in fleet operations, the fleet department budgets for normal operating and repair costs, but sometimes there are repairs that are out of the ordinary that come up through the year. In this case, a high-speed runway broom at the airport, compost screener at the landfill, and then just some other cost increases that they would like to cover. Then in parts, additional broom bristles for the airport. These are not what I would think of as a broom, but the very large, heavy equipment that operate to clear the runways. So an increase in costs, and then also for fuel, more spent on fuel as we have larger tanks now with the new fuel system out of Public Works. So the total increase in the fleet budget is $240,000. These costs are passed through to the departments and funds that use them, so it is a net zero impact on the fleet fund.
Connie, I just wanted to say regarding the fuel costs, it's not that our fuel costs have gone up dramatically, it's that we have larger tanks, and when we filled them this year, that fuel will probably be used next year.
That's correct.
So we're not increasing our fuel consumption dramatically.
That's right.
We should also point out that it wasn't just the bristles that cost $810,000 because we could have bought a new vehicle for that.
No, the
it was all
bristles-
kinds of other parts and pieces that were included in
Right. The bristles are about $75,000.
Yeah. That was concerning to me.
Next request is the Conservation Trust Fund. We receive a portion of the state's lottery proceeds based on our population, and those are coming in stronger this year than what we anticipated when we set the 2019 budget. We passed those through, so we do need to increase the transfer out of the Conservation Trust Fund when we bring in extra revenue there. So it's just an increase there. Next is the transit sales tax, and we have a 1% mass transit tax and a 0.5% mass transit tax. And the bulk of these, the 1% is passed through entirely to RAFTA, City of Aspen, and Town of Snowmass Village. Right now, through October, our sales tax is up almost 19% compared to prior year. So we've seen a large increase, partially due to new legislation that requires taxation on internet sales and also on goods that are purchased outside of the county but delivered to Pitkin County. So as we're collecting more of the transit tax, we pass through more, so we need to increase our appropriations. Next, general improvement districts, Redstone Ranch Anchors and Twining Flats, and the increase is for the snow plowing costs. These are very small budget amounts for these two districts, but this is just to make sure that they're not overexpended for the year. If you remember, we did have a large snow year last winter and spring, so this is just covering the extra costs. For the ambulance service, the 2019 budget is lower than the projection for the total net cost of Aspen Valley Hospital providing ambulance services. This is an increase of $50,611. Basalt Vista Housing. There was an increased cost of $100,000 to install solar panels at Basalt Vista, and originally staff was hoping that this cost could be covered through savings in what the county is already paying for the project. But as they've progressed further into the project, they realized that that won't be the case, and so we do need to appropriate another $100,000 for those solar panels. Then overhead cost adjustments. The overhead is charged out based on prior year actual costs, and when we're estimating budget, there are things that we are not able to anticipate. There are a number of funds, as you see on the screen, that the overhead costs came in higher than what we budgeted. So again, an adjustment to budget. I've met with a couple of the different funds to actually go over in detail what makes up their different costs so that they're aware of this. Next, agency funds. As we're moving to our new financial accounting software, and it's a good time to change some fund structures to better align with best accounting practices. So we are moving a number of items that used to be accounted for in the general fund into an agency fund. So jail commissary, Emergency Medical Trauma Advisory Council, Public Safety Council, and the Firearms Training Program. Those are all moved into an agency fund and will no longer be in the general fund. Then also a few of the costs that are passed through community development, which are fire marshal fees and housing referral fees, are also moved to an agency fund. So again, this is realigning our budget with our new chart of accounts. And then the final request is on the resolution itself, but not in the write-up, and that is to move a number of budget items, and the dollar amount, as mentioned, is well over $4 million, but there are no new programs, no new expenditures. It's simply realigning our budget to match our new fund structure. For example, we now are paying debt service costs out of a debt service fund and need to set up transfers from the Open Space and Trails Fund, Capital Fund, and Ambulance Fund into the debt service fund. So it's just a realigning and cleaning up of the budget to match our new chart of accounts.
Connie, just reading this, this is transitioning to the new ERP, and if anybody wants to read the fine print, it's kind of interesting that we've taken the old 13,000 old accounts and consolidated them into half as many, 6,500
That's right.
new accounts. So this is an effort to make it more efficient and modernize while also switching to the new Munis system. Is that
That's correct. Are there any questions?
We've all seen it. I don't know how many times we've seen it, but I think we're all pretty versed in it. Questions? Other questions? If not, we have a public hearing.
I just want to say, though, that I appreciate doing the quarterly supplementals. I remember how many years ago it was. They used to come trickling in throughout the year. I think this gives us a better grasp on our spending and the transparency of it so that it's more trackable, I think, for the public and for the board. So thank you, Connie, for doing that.
Yeah, good point. This is a public hearing. If there's anyone here who would like to speak on this matter, raise your hand. Come on up. I see a lot of enthusiasm out there. Okay, I'm going to close it and bring it back. No other board comments, questions?
I'll make a motion to approve second reading a resolution, the Board of County Commissioners providing supplemental appropriations to the 2019 budget and amending the 2019 budget fourth quarter.
Second. And we've got 2 seconds.
Thanks, Connie.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Thanks, Connie. Okay, up next, we have, it's a public hearing also, resolution authorizing acceptance of the 2019 Emergency Management Performance Grant, a grant from the state of Colorado, Department of Public Safety, Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Management, for the purpose of funding a portion of the Pitkin County Emergency Management Annual Budget. Valerie's been waiting patiently.
Good afternoon. I'm Valerie McDonald. I'm the Pitkin County Emergency Manager. I work for the Sheriff's Office. I'll just give you the short version today. I went into a great deal of detail last time, but if you have questions, feel free to ask me. This is the 6th consecutive year I've been here asking the board to approve the Emergency Manager's Performance Grant. The grant is the primary source of federal funding directed to state and counties for the development of all-hazard emergency management planning. It's $65,000 annually, and it's used to offset a portion of the emergency management budget, and I'll stop there.
We've all seen this before. Any other questions or clarifications needed?
Just another huge thank you to Valerie for an amazing job that she does and that you're highly respected throughout the region and throughout the state, and we appreciate the work you do.
Thank you.
Thanks, Patty. Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
With the public hearing.
Oh, it's a public hearing. Thank you. I caught myself up. This is a public hearing. If anybody'd like to speak on this topic, raise your hand. No one is. I'm going to close this back up and bring it back to the board. I'd entertain a motion.
I'll move to approve this resolution accepting the 2019 Emergency Management Performance Grant.
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, Valerie, stay put because we have the resolution, repealing resolution number 27, 2015, approving a 2019 intergovernmental agreement with the state of Colorado Division of Fire Prevention and Control for the Cooperative Wildfire Protection Agreement.
I'm here with an intergovernmental agreement between the county and the state Colorado Division of Fire Prevention and Control. The Cooperative Wildfire Protection Agreement formalizes the relationship and process between the state and the county when it comes to wildland fire management and response. The agreement is updated every 5 years. It addresses issues such as response, resources, fire restrictions, investigations, billing, and cost share agreements, and much more. To put it in context and try to decode it for you, we have 3 agreements with the state regarding wildfire. This is the overarching agreement. The other 2 are referenced in this plan, our annual operating plan. That does not come to you for review, but all the local and state and regional partners and federal partners come together every February and go over the plan in minute detail. I mean, how will we order resources? What are our comm channels? Things like that. The next one is the Emergency Fire Fund. It's basically an insurance policy that Pickens County pays into annually to help with suppression costs on wildland fires in the county. That agreement is a 5-year agreement as well, and it's going to be coming to you in the next couple of months for renewal. So this agreement is the overarching agreement. I'll pretty much stop there. I mean, usually the conversation around wildfire has to do with suppression and prevention, but these contracts, IGAs that we have with our partners are vitally important to getting the resources we need and possible reimbursement if we have a fire. When we have the next fire. And I'll stop there.
Kelly.
Yeah, thank you for forwarding the IGA. I appreciate the detail, and also thanks for convening the group of elected officials to talk about our role in emergency response recently. It made more sense to me to read the IGA after that discussion to kind of see how all the pieces fit in. So I learned a lot, and I really appreciate it.
Great. I appreciate the level of participation we got. Nobody wants to talk about emergencies, or they're still under the delusion we won't have more, but we got good participation from throughout the entire valley, elected officials and senior management, to talk about what their role is during a disaster emergency. So thank you.
Yeah, it was a great little meeting that we had, and it was very efficient, and I think it spurred a lot of good conversation. So again, thanks for that.
And I think the takeaway I always have from these, this is probably the second one like this that I've attended, is that elected officials are not the main point of contact. You know, a constituent can always call us and ask what's going on, but we're going to go through a chain of command that's actually commanded by an incident commander and their chain, and we're somewhere down the chain. We're just going to wait to hear what our county staff, our county manager will tell us, or his surrogate, in the event of a fire. So there's a clear chain of command and communications throughout the entire community in order to keep things safe and to keep things moving smoothly and let them do their jobs, whether it's a wildfire or a measles outbreak or an avalanche or anything like that. So it's important stuff, and thank you for bringing it back to us. And I think you were complimented, and our county was, because I think our plan and our organization in our valley seemed to really stand out, according to the gentleman from
Todd Mans,
who came in from Denver, who's the consultant who works with counties all across and municipalities all across the country, said that, you know, we're in the top 5 when it comes to being prepared, which is pretty nice to hear.
We've got the structure in place. We've got an incident management team, and then we have the Emergency Operations Center, over 200 subject matter experts who could fill a role in that and know what their responsibility is. most counties don't have it. They don't really know who is going to fill those seats. So we're ahead of the game. We remain humble. We've been fortunate. We haven't had a lot of disaster emergencies here, but I'm quite certain that when we do, we will work our way through it.
Right, thank you.
Yeah, I mean,
George?
the other thing we've done, and I can't remember the exact number or if any other counties do this, but we have allocated dollars to the sheriff's department in case of a fire, so that when the sheriff's department don't have to come back to the BOCC to ask for funds, and you get boots on the ground immediately to get things rolling.
150,000 a year.
150,000 a
It's
year.
150, and it's really meaningful to us in the public safety arena, simply because we don't have to stop and think about the spend before we order the resources that we need, for instance, to get an airdrop to stop a wildland fire. We've got the green light to go and get it done in the initial attack, which will go a long way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we're thinking that's about a 2 to 4 day, is it a 48-hour, the burn rate on a big fire, something could be very high. So that money will be gone, but it'll give
It
the
could be
community
gone
time.
the first half a day.
Right.
Yeah, just real
Betty?
quick, and this is just on a side note, I think the community needs to know that when X Games is here, which is coming up, that's it. We set up an incident command system there at the Mountain Rescue Building, and it really is a time for all these partners to come together, meet each other. So when there is an emergency outside of that, we already have some relationships established, and it's just an amazing thing to see how all these parties work together, and it's a great opportunity for people to put their boots on the ground outside of, just to be prepared and have that experience. And I think that's a great opportunity for us in this community.
So one thing I'll say just real quickly, relationships are everything here. I mean, there's nothing that's going to happen anywhere in this entire valley that's not going to impact all jurisdictions,
all of us.
all municipalities. So we have to work together, and if we didn't have those relationships in place and agreements like I'm bringing to you today, we could have never done what we did during the Lake Christine
Right.
fire and initial attack. So
And
it's
it
really,
showed.
really
It showed to
important.
people who came from around the country. They've been to communities around the country where people work together, but they were really impressed at how there were no political boundaries. And as we know, emergencies don't stop at county lines. So it all came together, and it was quite an example of working together, cooperative agreements when we were down there at the site.
Steve?
We have a friend who was in the Paradise Fire in California and lost her home there. And she described the chaos that there was when that fire came so quickly into town. There were only 4 roads out of town. People were just driving down roads looking for a way out, and the roads would be blocked, and they'd have to come back into town and try another one. It was really a chaotic situation. They were lacking in communication, just people from one car telling the next car, you can't go this way, let's try going another way. To me, that just points out the fact that we need to plan our actions before the emergency happens. And we don't know what the emergency will be, where the fire will be, what direction it will come from, but the more we plan ahead, which is what you do all the time in your job, and we really appreciate that, the more likely we will be able to have more people survive if there is that kind of a wildfire here.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate the job you do, Valerie.
Thank you.
This kind of agreement with other agencies is a critical part of it.
But since you brought that up, there are so many comparisons between Paradise Valley and Pickens County. The ingress, egress problems, all the homes built in the wildland-urban interface, and the public being basically unprepared. I mean, I talk to people every day that think, well, it's never going to happen to me, or we've had our fire, now we're done. And if really, the way I look at it is, if the public's not prepared, government fails. And it's been really a tough message to get out there because people don't want to deal with it. They don't want to think about it. But to your point, if somebody doesn't have a plan before the fire is swooping down on them, that it's just not going to go well. If you're wondering what your evacuation routes are and what you want to grab on your way out the door and what your family communication plan is, if you're trying to do that during the fire, you will stall out. It's human nature. So everyone really needs to have go bags and have a thought process about it, which most people don't. And we're all out there trying to educate people, but they haven't heard us yet, even after the last Lake Christine fire. I thought finally we're going to get some work done, and I haven't seen all the education equate to mitigation work being done in preparedness.
Well, we're going to keep trying. We're going to keep trying to get everyone's attention, and appreciate your efforts on that. This is a public hearing. Did I open it? This one yet? No. Anyone want to speak on this topic? This is your chance. Don't see anybody coming forward. I'm going to close it and bring it back for a motion.
I'll make a motion approving an resolution of the Board of County Commissioners repealing resolution number 027, 2015, approving a 2019 intergovernmental agreement with the State of Colorado Division of Fire Prevention and Control for Cooperative Wildfire Protection Agreement.
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Thanks, Valerie. All right, we're going to keep moving here. One of our new items that was added is the ordinance authorizing acceptance of the Juniper Hill donation parcel. Dale, thank you for coming.
Thank you, Greg. Once again,
Great to see you
I'm
again.
Dale Will, the acquisition manager for Pitkin County Open Space and Trails, and appreciate your patience in getting this back on the agenda. Was in contact with the owner of this property, Sally Hansen, yesterday. The person that was thinking they wanted to buy it has backed out due to the constraints on the property, which are the same things that make open space interested in having this parcel protected. We've discussed this on first reading, but just to cover it briefly, the property is on Juniper Hill Road. It's a 2+ acre parcel that has a wetland on it and a nice aspen grove. And the owner, once again, wants to donate this to Pitkin County Open Space and Trails. As a result of the publicity, the first time we heard this, I've been in contact with the BOCC Metro District, and we may have an opportunity to have them manage it or maybe even ultimately convey it on to them. They take care of all the common spaces and open spaces in the BOCC Metro District. And since one of our primary apprehensions about accepting this was the ongoing costs of maintaining it, I'm more hopeful than I was at first reading that we'll come up with a way to minimize or eliminate those costs.
Did you say Basalt Metro District?
I said that. I meant
said it twice.
Brush Creek Metro District.
Brush Creek, thank you.
Thank
Brought
you.
us back to
The other B Metro District.
If we can get Basalt to do it, that's great too.
Oh boy, I'll probably get phone calls about that this afternoon. No, I meant to say the Brush Creek Metro District, and Rick Stevens in particular has indicated an interest in helping us with the supervision of this property. So with that, the Open Space Board again has unanimously recommended we accept this, and this is second reading. Rye and I are poised to come up with a deed and communicate with the owner's council and get this thing into county ownership.
Okay. Question, Kelly.
Sure. Well, appreciate the news and development. You know, I'm not a huge fan of the county taking on management of this, given that it is an inholding in a neighborhood and isolated from any future potential to expand to other open space or connect thereof. So that's helpful. I don't remember if we resolved my outstanding question about the water rights and if there's any concern of the wetland drying up due to water being pulled out for a right further upstream.
Right. I haven't been in contact with John. John Ely was taking notes on first reading, and I think he probably expected this to be back in a meeting where he was still here. But that's based on what I know, we don't have any adjudication of the water rights for this wetland, but the water has been flowing there. And consequently, if there's some mechanism that we can use to file on the water that's flowing through there or otherwise protect it, that's certainly something that I would explore with the county attorney's office. But I don't have anything specific on that.
That concerns me. Yeah, go ahead.
Steve?
So I would recommend that we do investigate filing on the water rights on that, because that's one of the main reasons we're getting it is it's this high elevation wetland. Someone else could come in and file on that water right and develop it and put it in a pipe and take it somewhere else in the subdivision, going by Colorado water laws. So it would behoove us to protect it, because we want to protect that wetland resource.
Right. My understanding would be that someone could file on the water if they can prove that their consumption of the water wouldn't harm another water rights holder. So it would be, I think, a more involved question of where is that water going after it's flowing through here and who's ultimately using it. But nonetheless, I agree with you, and that's certainly something that we can follow up with the county attorney's office.
Yeah, that being said, and I don't think we can disagree with that because of the importance of this wetlands. It's in a place nobody would have expected to find a wetlands with some interesting vegetation and habitat. I think it's important to note that we will be looking at this with the later consider possible reconveyance of the property subject to permanent conservation easement protecting the habitat values. That could also be if the wetland was for some reason to go away, we'd have the opportunity then to reconvey in the future. So we're kind of covering ourselves. But I think the priority would be to maintain this wetlands and look into those water rights. But I see no reason not to move this forward now because of the time frame. And I'm sorry that there was a glitch with this property being listed and under contract that we kind of weren't aware of, and that has gone away. So I think we need to move it forward today.
If that's it for questions, I want to take it to public hearing. It's a public hearing on this topic. If anyone wants to say anything, this would be your opportunity. Not seeing anyone. Everyone's from the east end of town, I think. I'm going to close it back and bring it back to the board. And I'm looking for a motion.
Make a motion to approve?
Then I'll second.
We have a motion, we have a second. Further conversation. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, thanks, Dale.
I'm not an aye.
You
weren't-
also
were-
say opposed.
Oh, I could have said all opposed. I thought I saw you nod. We have four for, and one against.
I want to hear that nay.
Yeah, where's the loud nay?
That was your first nay? No, it wasn't.
No, it
That
wasn't.
wasn't your
No, it
first nay.
wasn't.
It won't be your last, probably.
Okay.
Don't be bashful about saying.
But I
Thank
wanted to
you
give her
all.
the opportunity to nay it.
All right, we're going to move right into land use public hearings.
Yes, because we have an audience that's waiting, and I think people have places to go.
This is the main event, I think, for the crowd that are here. You sure you don't want to take a half-hour break?
We've got people who need to be out of here, and they're
This is for an ordinance approving an amendment to Section 5-10 of the 2006 Pitkin County Land Use Code, Title 8 of the Pitkin County Code, specifically Table 5-1B, dimensional requirements, urban/suburban residential zone districts other than affordable housing districts, and an amendment to the Pitkin County zoning plan. Second reading, Suzanne Wolf is here.
Sorry, I
Mitch
got
is here.
distracted by the model out in the hall.
I know, that's pretty exciting stuff. We need to expand that model. And it's non-3D printing. Okay.
If I might,
welcome.
Mr. Chair, before I step out, that model has been moved out into the lobby area instead of next door.
Great.
And so once the board happens to take a look at that, I've got his number so he can come back and pick
Okay.
that up, so we don't have that overnight.
If you
So
have a
could.
chance,
All right.
yeah, we will look at it and make sure the GS and ComDev and everybody else knows
They
it's
have,
there.
they were in the room whenever I was there, so.
Oh, excellent. Great.
Okay. All right.
Thanks.
Thank you.
okay. We need to
All
move
right,
this because we
let's
have
do
people that
this.
need to be out of here. So
So this is second reading for an ordinance to amend the land use code. First reading was held on November 20th, and it was approved on first reading. There were no changes to the ordinance. Basically, the request is to clarify language in the code related to the growth management exemption for duplexes in Mountain Valley. I think you're all familiar that we've sort of had this ongoing conversation about this, and this is finally the, I think, culmination of figuring out how to correct this in the code, having enough information to really be able to understand that this was an error that was made that needed to be fixed. And so that's the application that came forward, I think has accomplished that, and it's supported by staff. We're recommending approval. I don't know that I need to throw any more out there at this point unless you have specific questions for me.
We have seen this. Questions,
I'll
George?
just say, I was not here at first reading, but I did review this online, so
Same for me.
I saw the packet.
And I'm very familiar with what's been going on up there.
Other comments, questions? Steve?
Well, this is correcting a wrong that has been in existence for quite a few years, and nobody really realized until a couple of years ago that we really have a problem here that needed resolving. So I really appreciate you putting up the money to hire Mitch to figure this out. To thank you for all the neighbors too that it was a tricky situation, and I think we have a good solution here that I fully approve of.
Thanks, Steve. Any comments from your side? And Mr. Smith, Kenny, thanks for being here. Mitch Haas, just for the record.
I was only going to say nothing's changed since the first reading a month ago, but I didn't recognize George and Patty weren't here, so I'm happy to answer questions rather than waste your time going through a whole presentation that maybe you don't need to hear.
We have the ability and the luxury of watching previous meetings from wherever we happen to be, and we're usually pretty good about following up, and I also talk with staff in the interim, so I'm good to go.
I happen to know an appraiser who was doing an appraisal up in Mountain Valley that first noticed this little quirk and brought that to the community development's attention.
Do you know that appraiser personally?
I suspect I don't know who you're talking about. Yeah.
This is a unique situation. This is a situation that doesn't exist anywhere else. This is for one specific unique location, Mountain Valley.
They are specific and unique up there, all of them.
We've always thought they were kind of unique.
And right, we've called it the Mountain Valley Amendment, but really it's the R15A Zone District Amendment.
Thank you.
Only applied to Mountain
Public
Valley.
hearing.
So, well, I wanted to make one more comment to all of you here from Mountain Valley subdivision. When the Snowmass Capitol Creek Caucus formed many years ago, its first name was Mountain Valley Citizens Association. And that happened just about the same time that your subdivision was created. And immediately there was this confusion as to the name of our caucus, everybody thinking it had to do with your subdivision. And so we, on short order, we abandoned that name and took another name. But that's a little historical interest story that you probably never heard before, but I'm glad that you got to keep your name, and so many of you have lived there for such a long time in that subdivision.
This is a public hearing. Is anybody here who would like to say something on this topic? If not, we're going to bring it back. I don't see anybody. They're all sitting on their hands today.
I think they see.
No, we got one. Grafton,
You need to come forward and be on mic.
Identify yourself. Where's your sport coat?
I'm Grafton Smith, and I'm going to sit here very, very shortly. I just think that everybody would like to stand up and say something, but I think they're worried about stretching the process any longer than it need to be. So everybody here is obviously in support. We recognize the great work that's been done. Mr. Smith, the other Mr. Smith. I feel like a bookend, kind of. We have the same hair and same last name. But in any case, just wanted to recognize everybody's efforts, and we like what's happening, and I'll cut it at that.
Great. Thank you. Thank you all for coming. I'm going to close the public hearing. I'm bringing it back to the board. I need a motion.
I would like to make a motion to approve an ordinance approving an amendment to Section 5-10 of the 2006 Pickens County Land Use Code, Title 8 of the Pickens County Code, specifically Table 5-1B, dimensional requirements, urban/suburban residential zone districts other than affordable housing districts, and an amendment to the Pickens County Zoning Plan. This is on second reading. That's why it's taken so long, because the title is so long. So I will make a motion to approve.
Second.
We have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, great,
Done.
thank you.
Thank you all for coming. Have a great
You can all
holiday.
start sailing now, or whatever it is you do. Oh, with public comment, oh, sorry.
This is not a public, this is a private comment.
Well, you're on.
Well, you're on the record on
This
television.
entire room was filled with people that were interested in the very last agenda that you guys put on your docket. And it seems kind of a waste of all of our time that we had to wait till the end of the whole enterprise, and 15 people were listening to you guys do your business.
We have a standard agenda
I understand.
We kind of do
Well,
this, and we
you
have a
can't
certain
modify
protocol
that?
here.
You
We're
can't
kind of
like-
out of order here, Greg. We're out of
You-
order.
I mean, is it like
Greg.
written in
Hey,
stone?
I don't,
that-
sir, you're out of order. Please,
Oh,
save it
okay,
for, you gotta
sorry.
come back. You send us a letter.
Hey,
with-
thanks for
with-
what you did. Appreciate it.
We're gonna take a break. Are we taking a break, or are we gonna keep
We have
going?
two more people who've been waiting the whole time.
I
for
know,
the
we've
next
got other
items.
people who've been.
Hey, it doesn't matter, you know?
It's
They want to attend,
1:36.
that's the way it goes.
I'm good. I'm good to keep going.
We're gonna keep going right now. Okay, we're gonna keep going, folks. Please clear for us. We've got the next item up. Thanks for coming.
Thank you for your patience. We appreciate it.
Okay.
Just read the agenda
Always
and you
somebody.
come when it's
All right.
been a day for that. God, people, it's supposed to be the happy time of year.
Yeah, they should be celebrating. Okay, come on down. Up next, we have, this is a public hearing. It's a resolution approving the Snowmass Creek Outfitters special review and outdoor recreational use. Tammy's here, and you have some guests.
So this item is, or the applicant for this item is Snowmass Creek Outfitters LLC. They are represented here today by Amy Groom and.
I'm with McCabe Ranch, Brad Day.
Brad Day.
Okay, great. Welcome. Thanks for your waiting for us.
No problem. So they are requesting special review approval to use lands owned by the McCabe Ranch Properties LLC in the St. Benedict's Monastery for commercial horseback riding tours. Special review approval by the board is required for commercial outdoor recreation uses that occur on a repetitive basis more than 6 times in any 12-month period, so this application qualifies for this review. The applicant will also be utilizing Forest Service lands and has obtained those permits to do so, but that is not part of this review. The applicant is proposing to hold their rides from May to November. They'll occur 7 days a week from 9 to 6 p.m., with the majority of the rides occurring between 10 to 2. Typical rides, they've stated, are between 4 to 6 people. However, they request the ability to accommodate up to 28 people on a ride. They state that the guide to client ratio will be 1 to 5. All guides will be CPR and first aid certified. 2 porta potties will be provided at the staging area. So that's what's shown on the screen here is the St. Benedict's parcel where parking will occur. The porta potties will be. It's also where the horses are secured and where the rides start from. And this parcel is also known as 3941 Capitol Creek Road. On this next slide, we've got kind of an area, the general area where these rides will be held. The red line, let's see, a little bit hard to see, but this red thin line is the route for the rides. Down here at the bottom of the screen was that St. Benedict's parcel where the staging would occur, right here where this red dot is. So based on this map and where they're showing the routes are, I've found that it encompasses basically 5 parcels, 3 of which are owned by the monastery and the other 2 are owned by McCabe Ranch. So Steve asked for a little bit of clarification on that. And in the reso, there is one mistake in one of the recitals that it says 2 parcels are owned by St. Benedict, so that should be changed to 3. So a little bit of background. Previously, Snowmass Creek Outfitters was under different ownership, and under that other ownership, they had a 5-year permit. That permit has expired. Under that old permit, they used the Capitol Creek Ranch property instead of the McKay Branch properties. They also operated on 5 days and were permitted to accommodate up to 20 riders. So the proposal's changing just a little bit. This application was referred to the Snowcap Caucus, the Roaring Fork Fire Protection District, Emergency Management, Environmental Health, and we did receive comments from the caucus. They gave their general support, and those comments were in the packet. They did request that the applicant provide some kind of recycling receptacle at that staging area. So, and informally, they've said they will make that happen on that parcel. So, next slide is, let's see, the criteria for approval for a special review use or activity. So, for special review consideration, the BOCC shall consider the applicable master plan, the county land use code, the zone district, and the character in the immediate vicinity. Staff believes that this application is consistent with all of those items. Again, Snowcap Caucus has stated their support. The RS30 zone district is intended to preserve environmental resources and maintain that rural character, and staff does believe that this use is consistent with that rural character, and this use is allowed in the RS30 zone district. Item B is the location, size, and design must be in harmony with the surrounding area and minimize adverse effects. So they have had a permit since about 2008. Rides will occur on existing trails, and so they'll have limited impacts to any adjoining properties. Commercial impacts are somewhat minimal due to the size, the fact that it's non-motorized, and that horse riding is, in general, compatible with rural activities. Horses will be boarded, like I said, at that monastery property, and that's where parking will also occur, so it's right off the road. They won't be, once they're on that property, they won't be driving anywhere else. The applicant has stated that if there are larger groups, they'll let them know that they need to be carpooling to the site to minimize traffic impacts.
How is that, and is that an enforceable request? If they all say no, we're all going to take our own cars? I saw that. I wanted to ask a question about it.
Mostly that's for the corporate groups, so they're already going to be utilizing like CTS or something like that. So that's kind of the bigger groups. They're always organized and utilize those buses.
So you'll be going through their organizer who
Their
will
planner.
know that that's something you're going to have to do to visit you.
Absolutely.
And please just identify your name for us again.
Amy Groom.
You're Amy. Okay.
Yes.
Great. Thanks. Just want to make sure. All right.
So staff has not received any complaints that we know of in previous years regarding this operation. So, like I did mention, that they are proposing more days and riders than were previously permitted, and so with that, staff recommends that the applicant submit an annual report giving us a general idea of how many trips they're scheduling and the amount of people on those trips, and just touch base with any issues, and that'll give us the ability to mitigate any issues that do come up. Number C is there must be adequate public facilities to service the special use. So there are 2 porta potties on site again. The applicant has demonstrated that they have emergency access, or emergency services can be contacted. There's cell phone service there. Each guide will carry an emergency first aid kit, and access points have been identified in case there is an emergency somewhere along the route.
And can I just mention too, it's my understanding that as part of the Forest Service permit too, staff is all trained with some basic first aid. So I think that's important. It's a great thing to have a first aid kit. It's even better when you know how to use it.
Right.
Kelly?
Yeah, I just, I'm wondering, why is 28 the magic number for max?
I think we did that based on how many horses, like that's kind of our average amount of usable horses per day. So we came up with 28.
I think you're
29 and they have to walk.
And do you think you have demand for 7 days a week, or is that just
no
flex?
Yeah, it's just kind of flex. It definitely won't be an everyday occurrence. It's just it'll probably be anywhere from 2 to 6 usually is kind of the most that it's used.
Okay, thank you.
Question just about taking care of the clientele. You've got water available, whatever, so people aren't running back to town to get something once you're out there.
Right.
I think that the biggest concern I have, and I'm glad you're reporting annually, just if we get a complaint, it's probably going to be about either the recycling and the trash left in the monastery dumpster or number of cars on the road. And you'll probably hear about it before we do, but we'll probably hear about it if it becomes a problem. So my guess is it's going to go smoothly. It's going to be great.
Correct.
But
And
we'll know about it every year.
Yeah, I plan to reach out to Brother Raymond directly because they do not have recycling on the monastery. So that's something that I'm happy to organize and work with them
Isn't that
on.
a county ordinance now for recycling?
They might have it within their other buildings, but the
Not at that
trash that
location,
we
right.
use, yes.
Great.
So that's good, because now you'll be
so
compliant
glad
with that.
No, I think they do
glad
within
you
their
guys
buildings.
are here doing this. This is great. It makes me feel good every time I hear that somebody's going to keep doing this. So thank you.
Sorry,
any
we
other-
interrupted.
No,
Yeah, sorry.
So the last criteria is that they need to demonstrate that the use will not materially endanger the public health, safety, or welfare, or injure the value of adjoining properties. So again, staff has no information that would indicate that this use would endanger public health, safety, welfare, or injure value of adjoining properties. And lastly, Section 24020 provides limitations of uses by special review. I think I have a slide of that, but basically the applicant has stated they understand those limitations and will comply with them. So therefore, staff recommends the granting of special review use conditioned upon that annual review for the term of 10 years, and recommends that the BOCC adopt the resolution granting special review use approval for Snowmass Creek Outfitters LLC.
Thank you, Tammy. That's it. Any other questions? It's a public hearing. Seeing no one in the room, I'm going to, we'll bring it back, Steve.
Amazing.
So, Tammy, based on the email I sent you about the different parcels, there was just a discrepancy in the application about how many parcels on the monastery and how many on McKay Branch were going to be used. And I just want to make sure we get it right in the resolution so that there's no confusion or going into the future.
So the parcels shown on this map, you can't really tell, and I could pull up GIS to highlight them, but they're pretty wonky. One of them is just this very irregular shape. So I think in their application they represented this route crosses 3 parcels, but if I GIS it, and I will definitely verify it, I've got 5 parcels that are being touched.
And
we can.
I see that at one point it crosses right at the corner of John McBride's property, and just want to make sure you're going straight from the monastery into McKay Branch at that point.
That little corner there, Steve, is actually wrong on this.
Well, it's not right on the way it's drawn.
Well, it happens on these maps all the time.
Yeah. So the pin is actually, that gap shouldn't be there, which would mean we wouldn't be crossing John's.
So I will sit down and really verify on a more accurate map which parcels this is going to entail.
Are the horses familiar with low-flying super cubs?
Delivering mail?
Yes.
They are now.
Yes.
Okay.
The ones that have been there, veterans are.
All right, so,
Sorry,
let's see.
Stephen, then
Oh,
George.
Just a couple more comments. The Snowmass Creek Outfitters held trail rides on our ranch the part that we have since sold a couple of years ago for quite a few years, and it started with, actually before Amy was involved in it, but in general, they did a really good job, but there's one concern I have that I want to make sure you're aware of. When you're riding across irrigated land, and it turned into a problem on our place where the horse riding trail crossed the slope, there wasn't any problem. It beat it up a little bit, but where the trail went long ways going up through a field, then the irrigating water where we flood irrigated would want to run down that trail. And just to be aware of it, it could be an issue possibly on either the monastery or on McCabe Ranch. And I think being aware of that, going into it and taking steps, if there is any erosion problem on the horse trails, to deal with it immediately I'd recommend that.
Absolutely.
And then also, I mean, Chris was always really good about closing gates, and you guys were in later years, but there are times when Brad might have cattle down in the McCabe Ranch, and just to be sure that the gate's always shut so they don't go up on the Monks Mesa end of the hayfield, which I know you're aware of that, Brad.
Yep.
It has to be your employees, Amy, that are the ones who need to be closing the gates, so.
Yes.
Okay.
It's nice to have an in-house expert.
That's right.
I wanted to ask a quick question just about, and Steve could answer this as well, it's just wildlife contacts. I don't know how often the elk and the deer herds are in there. I'm assuming fairly often, certainly in the sage areas that you'll be traversing. Is there any protocol that you observe, or is it a problem? Do you ever run into have conflict with having to alter your course because of elk or deer in the neighborhood, or how do you treat a situation like that?
Time.
Go ahead.
I would think the time of day that the rides are going to be happening, the elk are gone by that point. So I think that's more of a problem, like for us, an early morning gathering cattle or something. That's more of an issue than the midday
And
in the summer.
Yeah, and our horses, a lot of times they like to eat together with the elk, so they're very comfortable. They've been around them. It's not, when they see them, it's not startling.
Not a big an issue. Okay.
Did you ever get to talk?
George, sorry. Pardon me.
You have a Forest Service permit as well. So are you running trail rides up Capitol and Snowmass Creek?
We are not Capitol. We are West Snowmass Creek is where our permit is located. So that staging area is where we do our half day and overnight and hunting trips are from the West Snowmass Creek.
Okay, and then how do you access for you guys for parking?
At that location or at West Snowmass Creek?
Yeah.
We, before the bridge, right at the bridge, we have a small permit with the BLM, because that is BLM right there. So the Forest Service actually manages that BLM permit for us for parking purposes. So that's where we park for the west. We don't fit in the main trailhead due to a lot of vehicles.
Okay. And then do you also go up Hay Park?
No, we do not.
You don't, okay. All right, thanks.
We send cattle that way, but separate.
Yeah, okay.
Save the best for the cattle.
That's right.
Let's see. I just had one other question, and I guess it would be for you, Brad, that when they get over, it looks like they're going to a place near your house and then also near the barn down on the lower field. It looks like where the end spot will be, where then you would be having a picnic or something at that point. And
Exactly.
Is that something you've worked out with the Collins and everything?
Absolutely.
That it works out okay for you?
Yeah, we've been through that with Judy and Chris, and everybody's on board. And our homeowners also had an opportunity to internally to comment about this, and they were accepting.
Okay, is that it? I need a motion then, don't I?
I don't know,
Public
did the
hearing, already
applicant
opened?
have any presentation? Did you?
Anything else? Oh, I thought they did it already.
No.
I don't want
She
Tammy
covered it
to
all.
talk any more than she
Oh,
feels.
thanks.
So, let's see, I'd like to make a motion to approve the resolution of the Board of County Commissioners granting special review use approval for Snowmass Creek Outfitters LLC.
I'll second.
We've got 2
Kelly can
seconds.
get this. Oh, there's nobody here.
All in favor?
We've lost all our staff except for.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Rye's still here.
Rye's
Okay,
here.
Thank you guys.
Thank you. How exciting.
Yes,
Merry
happy
Christmas.
holidays.
So I guess we're not doing Sunfire Ranch today?
Well, let's take a break.
We're gonna take a 10-minute break. Is that enough? Grassroots 10-minute break.
They're here?
Back at 2:05, 2:06. Okay, we're back. This is the Wednesday, December 18th, regular meeting of the County Commissioners. And up next, item number 12 is the ordinance approving the Sunfire Ranch Open Space Preservation Master Plan. This is our second reading, and it's a public hearing. And Suzanne is in the dock with dignified guests. Dignitaries, I guess that would be.
There we go. Thanks, Greg. So, right, as you said, second reading. We had first reading on November 20th as well as the last item. It seems sort of anticlimactic to have not a whole lot to say at this point, but I think, we had a presentation and discussion at the last meeting, and obviously this is something that has been discussed over a fairly extended period of time, so I think everybody's pretty familiar at this point with the process that we're going through, the Open Space Preservation Master Plan, that we've been working with the applicant and the Open Space Department on this for a while. I think we're finally at a place where we're pretty comfortable with, all of the different types of uses that are proposed and how we address those with, future special review, when more detail is available for some of those. So I think, again, I don't know that I have a whole lot to add to what we discussed on first reading. There were really only very sort of minor changes to the ordinance after first reading. And just quickly there were some of the references to, I think, what was the agricultural activity envelopes was the correction that it's actually the pasture activity envelopes. There was a change in timing, sort of the trigger about at what point if they decide to go with the family compound versus the free market lots, like how that triggers, because these lots will be platted at this time. So if in the future they opt not to pursue the free market lots and sell those lots off, that plat would need to be vacated. So there was just a little change kind of in how the timing for the trigger on that. Corrected the numbers for the floor areas, condition number 15, that called out the amount of square feet for residential, agricultural, ancillary structures, commercial, and greenhouse floor area. Those numbers have all been corrected in the ordinance. And then we did, Steve, in response to sort of the concerns you'd raised about the fencing and the language, kind of regrouped and looked back at, there was language in the master plan itself that basically had reference to complying with the then current Colorado Parks and Wildlife standards. So we brought that language into the ordinance. So I think that provides the flexibility I think you were looking for to make sure, they're getting the fencing that's most appropriate for those needs. So, again, those are kind of the minimal changes to the ordinance. But right, maybe Dale can do more and give the less technical and more background or more.
Okay. Well, once again, I'm Dale Will, Acquisition Manager, Open Space and Trails. I've said a lot about this in a lot of different meetings, but overall, the Open Space Board and staff have been very supportive of this project. It's a big priority for us. This is the largest unprotected private holding along the Crystal River that's in Pitkin County. We've been working hard to protect that valley and other valleys in the county, and this property, as it came to us and as it came to Jason, was poised for not conservation. It was poised for something else with these 29 lots. The slopes up above this, the uplands of the ranch, I wish we had a 3D map like John Doyle's out there he just brought in for Aspen, because it's really astounding how much of the ridge line that you see when you drive up 133 is on this property, and to think about what that would look like if it had a bunch of driveways and houses, lights at night, and all of that kind of thing. So we continually go back to what's being accomplished in this master plan, which is to get all of that development off those hillsides, consolidate those 29 lots, each with a grandfathered development right into the development that's clustered along the edge of the property, the eastern edge, and done in a way that is sensitive to the conservation values of the property. It's an intricate plan, and I commend Jason for thinking in terms of not only conservation of the natural resources, but setting up this property so that it can sustain itself and sustain the family going into the future. It'll be fascinating to watch this going forward. But the Open Space Board has unanimously voted to approve this plan. Of course, we've got our GOCO funding that will be the next thing we do, assuming that you all approve this plan, as we will be finalizing the conservation easement and appraisals needed to set up a closing that we are hoping to get done in March before that GOCO grant finally expires. So I'm enthusiastic to see this here. I look forward to getting this project done and moving on to the time frame where we're watching Jason and his operations with what they're going to be doing out on the ranch.
Yeah, George?
Yeah, thanks. I was not here at first reading, but I did watch the meeting. And thanks, Greg, for posing my question and my concern in terms of the vesting right for perpetuity. I saw John Neely's remarks. My question is, though, because we have so many future ideas in terms of what uses you may utilize, and I appreciate the fact that each of those potential uses will need to come back to future boards under special review, determining at the time what might still be feasible and what might not, so I appreciate that. My question is, in terms of the vesting rights, if and when some of those potential uses come before the boards for special review, they are obligated or required to still follow the current updated, whatever the current updated building codes will be?
Definitely anything, those types of codes would all be rules of general applicability. So, whatever is in place at the time would apply.
Okay, great. And then the other question I recall that Greg posed was in terms of being able to utilize renewables for your energy. And I think I recall that you were going to look at any opportunities, but I don't know if you have something that is immediately that you're going to be able to utilize in terms of renewables.
There are hydro potentials on the property, and we've considered those. There are water rights issues that go along with some of those potentials. So, as I'm sure you could understand, we've been extremely busy understanding this process and getting this master plan, so we haven't been able to pursue renewables as a viable option since we've engaged on this process.
We did, however, establish an activity envelope at irrigation ditch siphon where there's a big drop coming off of Mesa and going back up. So that's the potential for hydroelectricity on the ranch. And we've defined an activity envelope for that use, but I think much like coming back for special review for lots of other things, it would be coming back for review of that potential once water rights are sorted out and they want to move forward with a hydroelectric production facility on the property. So we're anticipating there's an opportunity with an activity envelope, but it would have to come back once things are sorted out with water rights.
I mean, how about just utilizing solar panels on some of your existing structures, your barn? Is that a possibility?
Yeah, we've, as we're moving towards the end of this process, have started exploring some architectural and building options, and everyone that we've been speaking to, any new building or retrofitting would include solar. We said that's paramount, so definitely in the front of our list, as well as energy efficiency.
Right. It just seems like it just seems like, Jason, in terms of your philosophy and sort of your being a steward of the land, that you'd want to seek out any opportunities that you could to to go to renewables and lower your carbon footprint.
Yeah, that is absolutely our ethos at the ranch, is trying to be the most efficient and productive as we can with what resources are available.
Because in addition, you would then become, I would think, sort of a model for other ranchers who, may want to look at you as an example in terms of pursuing agricultural uses, but on sort of on a broader scale in terms of education, and certainly as a renewable site, that would, I think, add to that education for what one can do with one's land.
Right, absolutely.
George, I wanted to, if I could follow up on that.
Yeah, I have one too about renewables.
Thank you for bringing that up. I know the Holy Cross has a 69 kilovolt line crossing that was the service line for the Coal Basin. And so there are, certainly is possible, if you ever got into producing electricity, you already have an infrastructure in place. And that's an exciting thought. And I did want to ask Dale, I understand inside the boundaries of the conservation easement, you couldn't put solar without interfering with the qualifications from GOCO, right? GOCO has a condition that no renewables or no solar would be allowed in their conservation easements that they're participating in. And I'm wondering, is the free market land, for instance, within, that's not ruled by that conservation easement, is it? Say you wanted to put solar on one of your lots, just as a thought, could that happen without violating some term of the agreement with GOCO?
Well, GOCO's policy is they don't want to see solar farms on their conservation easements. They've made a determination that big fields covered with photovoltaic panels are not consistent with the conservation purposes that conservation easements have been authorized to do. I don't believe GOCO has any concern about rooftop solar and that sort of thing. Certainly we could go back to GOCO if there are issues about the kind of solar that Jason described at the last meeting, which is solar for on-site use. I think where GOCO would raise its eyebrows would be covering a big field with solar panels.
Something huge.
And I remember working on the Rock Bottom Ranch conservation easement update a few years ago, which is Eagle and Garfield County, but that's a GOCO project, and I seem to remember that solar was a big focus for ACES, obviously, up there. So.
And did they have to abandon that then, or
no,
they didn't?
Not that I recall.
Okay, Patty.
Yeah, somebody help me with history. There was a wind turbine proposed somewhere along there. Was that on this property?
It's on sustainable settings.
Sustainable settings. They did a test.
Yeah, so they studied a lot of wind currents. There was a lot of data that came through, but the Crystal River Caucus thought it was a scenic blight to have it. It was just one tower, and it kind of looked more like the old water windmills, when you used to pump your water with a windmill. So I remember there being a lot of studies. So just so you know, that's been done on that
Yeah, and
wind patterns. That
from my recollection, the data that was collected actually stated that wind wasn't viable in that location.
My recollection.
Yeah, and I knew that there were concerns for the visual.
Yeah,
from the scenic byway.
it either blew too hard or not enough.
Yeah. As wind will do.
As wind does.
Just wanted to I remember it
Other
being somewhere.
questions on things?
I want to make just a comment though on the site visit that we went on. It was really valuable to see that upper parcel, that great area by the cemetery was very cool up there, and how the setbacks will, set everything back from the ridge. Overlooking 133. So I want to thank you for taking the time to let us come up and walk the property again. Wish we could have spent more time and really hiked the whole property, but maybe in the future we can get back up there. It was great. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Kelly?
Yeah, I want to see if we're going to give the applicant an opportunity to present, since the last time we were here, all of our technology failed. It was very late in the day. I don't feel like we had quite the robust discussion on this that a $9 million acquisition might warrant. So I just want to ask if we're going to give that opportunity should they wish to.
We could. God, I feel like I've seen this so many times, but I'm willing and eager. And, any questions regarding that or something else you want to dive into? I certainly love to see it again. Before we go into that the question, just regarding back to my question regarding the free market lots. I'm not going to advise you to do it. I'm just wondering if you wanted to do solar on those free market lots instead of houses, would that violate GOCO's? Would they think that that was some sort of?
I would think so on that scale, because at
Just
that
wondering.
point you're talking about commercial solar for off-site use, and that seems to be where GOCO is stuck.
Even as far as the free market lots go?
Well, if those can encompass quite a lot of acreage, and we can discuss with GOCO what they would allow as a conservation easement reservation, but I would strongly urge
We're not going to go
not
there.
to mandate it in this
Okay.
plan.
Right.
Yeah, I would just say I would support GOCO's philosophy and goals, and not to have open space conservation land be utilized for solar farms. My question and concern was just to be able to utilize solar renewables just for your own personal energy uses on the ranch.
I think that would be okay by GOCO.
And we do have a section in the open space master plan entitled Renewable Energy that talks about all of that. So it's actually page 40 of the open space master plan. I don't know what page it is in your PDF. I could read through it if you want me to, or you can take a look. But yeah, it is. I mean, I think it supports everything we've talked about, including the ability to to install photovoltaic panels in activity envelopes in a manner consistent with the conservation easement, sold back to the grid if there's excess energy. I mean, so there's just a series of things like that are in the master plan itself. So, I think it covers, just as a concept, what you're talking about, and allows it to happen as long as it's consistent with the conservation easement.
So as far as the presentation, I don't know what you're prepared to do today, but I would like to see something, but I think an hour or 2 hours might be a bit long, if you don't mind.
Yeah, quite honestly, the piece that we tried to prepare last time was just kind of an overview of the property. As Dale was saying, it might be nice to see some of this three-dimensionally, so rather than try and fly it in Google Earth, I saved it to a QuickTime movie, and it shows the property, the 29 original lots three-dimensionally. Then it shows the proposed master plan and activity envelopes three-dimensionally. It's only about 60 seconds long for each one, but it gives you an overview. We can stop it along the way if you want, but it gives you an overview of kind of the impact that the existing lots have on the ridgeline and kind of close to 133, and then shows kind of what the modified master plan is. So I can cue it up if.
Yeah, I think that would be great, and I appreciate that.
She just
You know,
wants
we've
to
gone on
test
the
the
site visit,
technology.
We've heard the ideas of the uses, but the public you have to read through the packet and the master plan.
So can I get to that jump drive, Suzanne?
Yeah, just, you can just close that and then.
Okay.
It's.
I just want to test the technology to see if it's working this time.
I'm gonna have a cookie while we watch it.
You can have a
Close it
cookie.
here.
Just reduce it.
Reduce that one.
Hit the.
You probably know exactly which one you want to
I like them all,
So-
but I'm gonna get the one you took, or maybe half.
So you guys got to be prepared.
All right, we're gonna stop it here. Let me see if I can make it full screen before it starts going here.
It's like that diagonal thing with the arrows.
All right.
Well, cool.
And it really is just for context. So you can see the location of the 1,240-acre site in relationship to Carbondale to the north, Mount Sopris with all the snow. So it's kind of midway between the two.
It's not
To
sugary.
the east side of this property is Highway 133. So that runs along the majority of the property. Just north of this property is Bill Fales has a conservation easement there. Sustainable Settings has some property close by as well. So I'm going to go ahead and just run this. It really is quick. I may stop it along the way, just so you can have a chance to look.
Good soapers.
Please do.
We'll just kind of take your Dramamine now. But these are the grid is really the 29, so I'm going to stop it. So the grid just represents all of the different ownerships on the property. So it shows the 29 lots. Thompson Creek is here. That's kind of running through the ranch property. This property jumps up onto the ridge line here. This is the South Mesa where we have some pasture activity envelopes. The free market lots are, okay, it'll be on my next, I'll run it again with the proposed open space master plan. But you can just see how some of these properties go all the way up to the top of the ridge. So, I mean, the intent of this is to bring the development down into kind of the existing areas of development on the property, take them off the ridge line. I'll just kind of keep going here. You can kind of see it as we move along. So again, we're looking from south along Highway 133 to the north. Again, the highway is here, running along the east side of the property. You can see some of the existing residential stuff that's kind of to the south. Then we're just kind of scrolling along here to look. Up on top, again, Thompson Creek runs through the property here. The lots kind of encroach on the hillsides on either side. Kind of get down to kind of the Highway 133 level here in a minute, so you can kind of just see a little bit where those, so you can see how high these lots all go up to the ridge line on that side.
What are the purple and blue strips on there?
So those are actually properties. So they are color-coded. I can't tell you which of the entities owns those strips, but they're color-coded to ownership. So that actually is a parcel. Like the blue is a parcel, the purple is a parcel. Okay. Then all of the yellow and greens are parcels representing different ownerships. Yeah.
So those are already
They're subdivided. Parcels. Yeah, so those are subdivided parcels.
The purple didn't have anything to do with the gravel resource?
No, it had to do with my planter colors. So it's just trying to represent a different color for each ownership.
You just wanted to confuse us.
Yeah, yeah. But I will show you the proposed envelopes after this.
Is that a ditch?
Yeah.
Which ditch?
Sweet Jessup.
That's Sweet Jessup that runs up.
Yeah. And so the siphon, I'm sorry, that we were talking about actually comes off of this down to Thompson Creek and then back up to the mesa on the other side. So that's the ditch that goes
the hydro potential.
Yeah, that's the hydro
the
potential that we were talking about is the Sweet Jessup ditch. So again, it's just kind of orienting back around. North is up, Carbondale is to the north, and then it's just going to end where we started. So, so then I'll just see if I can be smarter than the machine.
Good thing we don't get car sick or anything.
And then this guy. So it gets the lines are a tiny bit pixelated. I'll stop it as we get a little closer because it becomes a little clearer. So you can see the overall property. These are I'll stop here. This is the family compound envelope that we've talked about. These are the free market lots that we've talked about. They're set back from the edge of the hillside here. As you know, these two envelopes or sets of envelopes are the either-or situation. So if this gets developed, this is actually illustrated as a 15-acre activity envelope that would get reduced down to 10 at site plan review. So it's to give a little bit of flexibility for how things happen there. These are the 6 free market lot activity envelopes and the lots themselves. So that gets developed, then this envelope will not get developed. If this gets developed, then that will not get developed. So that's kind of the...
Steve? Question I never thought of before, but would it be possible for Jason to develop 1 or 2 or 3 of the free market ones and then do a smaller family compound? So do a little bit of each, or is it totally one or the other?
It's totally one or the other. I think I tried to make the clarification the last time that If he does develop in the free market lots, we wanted to make sure that, so that would basically sterilize the family compound envelope. But say like maybe one or two of these lots got developed, we wanted to make sure that if there's an opportunity to work with open space and trails to conserve the other 3 or 4, whatever the remainder is, that opportunity is still there. To say that 1 or 2 develops does not mean they all have to develop. But if one develops, that it does mean that the family compound.
So then it would be their choice. They could sell a couple and have other lots in the pre-market lots actually be for family members, sort of a family compound in a different location. It's
Right.
kind of a scenario.
Right.
But they would be on separate
Right.
separate lots
They'd be on
that
separate
could be
lots.
sold.
Separate parcels.
Right,
Yeah.
right. I mean, I just didn't want to close the door to the potential for additional open space in the future if one of those lots got developed up top. So it seems like, from what I'm kind of hearing, that we could come back and chat with you guys.
Yeah, I don't see any structural problem if there were 1 or 2 of those lots developed and you guys came back and said, hey, will open space compensate us to permanently eliminate the remainder of 2 or 3, whatever it is. We've done those kinds of things before with both the Jerome Park easement and the Dart property. We eliminated home sites that had been reserved in conservation easements.
So that would be the variation on that theme a little bit, Steve. I think that you were talking about, asking about. This is just going to take us on the same kind of flyover here as the last one, but. So again, you can see the upper pieces are not developed. We're kind of sticking down low. The 2 kind of uppermost envelopes are cabin envelopes. I'll stop here. There's a cabin that exists right up here with a driveway that goes up to it, that envelope goes up and comes around in a proposed cabin envelope here. The majority of the activity is in this main ranch headquarters envelope in this location here. The qualification that Thompson Creek runs through the middle of that envelope, so there are limitations on what can happen in the floodplain right there. Then again, these are the free market lots, and the gravel quarry envelope is actually that envelope there. I think you asked about that the last time. So that envelope, which has envelopes within it, is the quarry envelope.
Hey, Doug, before you start going, I just want to jump in and note that a lot of this land in the foreground has already been conserved by open space and trails. We've the Thompson Creek open space and sustainable settings and the Cold Mountain Ranch conservation easement. If the conserved lands were depicted here, a lot of that foreground would be shown as permanently protected, which is why this project contributes to adding value to investments the county's already made in protecting this corridor.
So Dale, that's pretty much on the west side of the of 133. Once you enter Pickens County, that whole stretch is now under conservation easements.
True.
Yep.
And several pieces on the east side of 133 as
Right.
well. Remember, we did those conservation easements with Richard Jelinek that are
Right.
now part of Two Shoes Ranch,
Crystal Island Ranch.
as well as that big meadow that's the Thompson Creek open space. So, but you're right, from the county line, our conservation easements actually start in Garfield County because Cold Mountain Ranch lopped over the county boundary and would reach all the way up to the top part of this ranch.
Yeah, and I forget, did we purchase or did we put a conservation easement on your other piece of land, Jason, on the other side of the river?
Oh, those ended up being purchased by Two Shoes Ranch there was 240s, I think, that were on the other side of the river.
I think he's talking about the 116.
Oh, the one that we just did a couple of years ago.
Right.
That,
Year ago.
if I had a mouse, I could show you where.
Do you want
that
north
one-
up, or you want to go?
Well, if I can just use a
But there was
cursor
another
to show.
part of, Jason, of your ranch property that went on the other side of the river, right?
Yeah, and that was actually part of the Lower Sewell Tracts, which is also known as the BRB subdivision.
Okay.
We own a 40-acre parcel that sits right in here that we got in the Ryan Exchange, and that last piece you're talking about, the tract 114, is the upper end of the BRB subdivision. So then again,
on the east side of the highway, there's a whole, we call it the string of pearls of open spaces up and down the Crystal Valley.
Yeah.
I'll just kind of finish up, and I'll leave the plan view up when we get to the end of this. And so again, it's just kind of taking it a little closer to the road, just to see the relationship of the ridge lines up above. And let's just kind of back out. So it gives you a little bit of context. You're right, Dale. It would have been great to show all of the easements around it. Jerome Park also has an easement that's up top.
And just if I were John Groves, I would point out that those upslopes that are protected with lots no longer on them are all winter range for deer and elk. And from a biodiversity protection point of view, this plan is really a win for wildlife.
Oh, yeah.
Comparing this to the checkerboard subdivision, it just is, this really shows it well. It just is astonishing how much better this plan is. So
And it won't
been
really
a big effort to get here,
yeah.
but I think it's been worth it.
Yeah. And I think, it won't show up as yellow lines on the ground either. So, I mean, I think,
We'll know.
It's just trying to illustrate where these activity envelopes are so they're visible. But, it really is trying to be sensitive. Many of our activity envelopes along access ways or along existing roads. And, we're trying to be sensitive to the environment that's there. And as you can see, north is relatively up. Those are all south and west facing, southwest facing slopes, and those are all the valuable slopes to wildlife. And wildlife is prevalent on the property. So that is kind of more of a big picture overview of how this lays out. Obviously, the details are in everything that you've been reviewing over time and on site. So hope that helped a little bit, just give you a bigger
It's
picture.
really cool. Thanks, Kelly, for bringing
Questions,
that up.
Kelly? Yeah, thanks for suggesting that. It was nice to see that. Anything else? It's a public hearing. If there's anybody here from the public who'd like to say something about this project, this ordinance, come up, but I don't see anybody. I'm going to bring it back to the board.
My last comment, I think it was mentioned again at the first reading, but it's amazing just in terms of how our open space master plans have evolved since I first started on the board. I think the first one on the board that I was involved with was Cold Mountain, and then we went to Grange, and then Deadwood, which started to have sort of some building rights tied in with the conservation land. And then this is really sort of, I think it's good, but it's really sort of 2.0 for open space master plans, looking at all different opportunities and potential for utilization of a large ranch. So it's just interesting to see how the program has evolved over the last 20 years, and certainly the invention of the open space master plans to help accommodate ranchers like this. Otherwise, it may not have worked.
Well, and I think George is right. We put all those other opportunities into the plan language for a reason, and this is the reason, to really. And I think the emphasis on education and sustainable ag and those opportunities in this amazing parcel are going to be huge for the other efforts the county's doing with sustainable agriculture, historic agriculture, and ranching in the valley. And we need to have a way to educate the visitors, the guests, the residents, the next generation, the current generations, on the importance of all of that, not just within our valley, but within our state and across the country and beyond. So I think that's that makes this very special. It's a beautiful piece of property.
I just wanted to add that it also involves an enlightened applicant. What Jason, you and your family and your team have done through all this time is so remarkable. And I don't think an application's come while I've been on the board, somebody who's thinking 100 years in the future. And that's one of the first things you said, and you've said it again and again, that you're trying to figure out how to preserve this and preserve your family's way of life sustainably on this land for many, many decades to come. And that is remarkable, and it's a model for everyone. So it's our great fortune to be able to work with you on this, and I'm hoping that that everyone takes note that what cool things are happening and what you've done here. And I'm so glad we were able to work with you on it. So thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
So I would be proud to make a motion to approve an ordinance of the Board of Pitkin County Commissioners approving the Sunflower Ranch Open Space Preservation Master Plan.
Second.
We have a second. Further discussion. Steve?
I would echo what Patty just said. This has been, it's been a long and convoluted process getting here. Same thing happened on our ranch, but then the end result was just well worth it. And I hope that this works for you and your family for more generations to come.
Kelly?
And I would just note, you guys have old water rights. You could have stayed with sort of traditional approaches to farming, which you've shown not to do, and to have a more diverse interest. And for me, I think that's going to be really crucial for the sustainability of agriculture in Colorado, is for farmers and ranchers to look at how they're using the land and just the strain on water resources, and how we diversify agriculture, and how we sort of redefine what an agricultural use is. And it's exciting that you guys have a lot of options ahead of you to do that, and I hope we'll be examples for other people who might want to try it.
I'm going to add just something that just came across in emails. I don't know how this may or may not, but just to inform you, there's a bill that's being introduced into United States Congress by Senator Michael Bennett about carbon sequestration on farms and ranches, that would give tax credits. It's just evolving. I think we're going to be following it, but I know that there's utilization of this, of plant products that are being grown in BOCC County on some conservation easements, which may be something we want to keep you in the loop on. We don't know where to go. We don't know what it may do, but I think it's very interesting, and I think Pitkin County is going to be hopefully very supportive of this with our activities within our county and around our state.
And we've already reached out to some carbon companies to start discussing.
I'll keep you guys.
possibilities, so
I'll make sure that
definitely
staff keeps
interested.
you guys in the loop.
Yeah, keep us in the loop.
Yeah, and vice versa.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to call it. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Merry Christmas.
All right.
Thank you, guys.
And have a happy 100
Check off
years.
the next step. Okay, what's next? Well done. Thank you all for coming. Appreciate
We'll be
the
seeing more of
presentation.
you. I hate to tell you, but we will be seeing more of you.
Okay,
And I love your
Suzanne's not
shirt.
going anywhere.
I know, is the shirt part of
So
the historic
appropriate for the
wear?
season.
Is Jason, is your shirt part of the historic ranch wear?
It is, actually.
I like it.
This was my celebratory shirt. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I know, we say happy 100 years.
Patty, I have recipes how to turn fat in the lard and stuff.
Oh, okay, I'll find you.
Yeah.
Plays
And have a
mine
Christmas
next
with
week.
you.
The mice will be playing
Thank
in
you.
here with all our cookies.
Getting close.
Trying to figure out how to get bear
Yeah, those
lard
cookies
out
are
of bear
great.
fat. Thank you.
Nope, you're all good.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Very weak convictions. Darn it. Okay, Suzanne is up, and we are here to talk about in the annual review of the TDR program.
So we do this once a year. It's actually mandated by a 1995 ordinance when we first adopted the TDR program. So I think it's been a good tool actually for us just to check in every year and see how things are doing and what's going on. But so just the report provides a lot of kind of data on how many TDRs, where they're being used. Mary Lackner with GIS creates a nice map for us every year that I've put up on the screen for you that shows, sending sites and receiver sites. So it gives you a nice graphic to see where TDRs are being used, where they're coming from. And we go through how much are TDRs selling for. The price is going up a little bit, but still kind of in the I think we're at 240 was the highest, so creeping up a little bit. But otherwise, don't really have specifics for you on this. I know it's we put this up on the website. I know it gets referenced by lots of folks in the valley, lots of realtors, looking for information on the TDR program. So I think it's just sort of provides us with a good data point each year. I'll just give Mary more kudos too that she's working with me on coming up with a better tracking system. I think we mentioned it last year. We're still working on it, but at some point, rather than me doing some manual work, pulling all these numbers together, there's all going to be a database that's all GIS, triggered in with GIS. So people will actually be able to go in and make queries online and go, how much did the most recent TDR sell for? Is this different kinds of things. So it'll be much more interactive, which will be great. And it'll also make it a lot easier for me to track and compile the information. So Mary's been a huge help with that. But otherwise, unless you have any specific questions, there is no action on this, but we do bring it forward annually at a public hearing.
No, I think it's fascinating to read through and remember all these things. Oh, did we deny that one? And they came back and changed their mind. And oh, wow, I'm so glad they didn't build 20,000 plus square feet.
Oh, let's see. I'm looking at the big green dots, and that one must be the Pepke's up on Richmond Ridge, a big green dot.
Yes.
The sending site for lots of TDRs.
Yes.
Okay. And what's the big green? One of the big green dots up on the frying pan would be the Lynn Nichols property.
Right, up
But
at the
what's
North
the other
Fork,
one?
that was the CDPUD. That was the constrained site TDRs for the Crowleys.
Oh, yeah, I remember that one. By the Nori colony.
Actually, those are right, it's right across from.
Yeah, but the Nori colony is above that.
Thomasville, no, it's lower down.
Yeah, the Nori colony is above it. Wow, it's interesting, very interesting.
I'm always interested in looking at the receiving sites that are in rural parts, because that's what I always hear about, of course, is we're sending them from prime places, but then we're landing them in places where some don't think it's appropriate to build monster houses. And I don't know how much of a conversation, I certainly am not prepared to have a conversation about it today, but it's something I hear about, and I'm sure you do too.
I think it's part of a conversation we'll continue with you related to growth management and TDRs. I know that's, on tap, I think, in the new year. Or it's always on tap, isn't it, George?
Well, I think as
last year.
Well, I think as ComDev and we've been able to approve the new building codes, and we've got the energy codes coming up in January, or second reading. I think that's next on a plate is the discussion with the TDR programs and house size. And, sort of a little editorial, see if I get myself in trouble here.
He's good at that.
You see a lot of receiver sites in Woody Creek. And Woody Creek Caucus has always voiced strong opinions in terms of the impacts that are landed in their communities, whether it be a solar array, which is not in their community, caucus area, or increasing the size of affordable housing in Phillips, and yet they have no qualms about utilizing TDRs for 15,000 square foot homes and the impacts that has on the neighborhoods from transit and services and energy use. It's just kind of interesting.
Thanks,
and I'll be
George.
waiting for the phone calls.
Humbug.
And if they come to me, I'm sending them to you.
And just one thing to note, Greg, since you mentioned the rural area, prior to 2006, we did allow use of TDRs for new development rights. So a number of these are representing, some of those approvals, prior approvals that, remain, have not expired, still remain. alive. Since 2006, we have not allowed use of TDRs for those initial development rights in the rural area. So this doesn't distinguish between the for additional floor area versus that new development right. Mary's capable of doing that, but again, I think that's another picture that I think is interesting to see.
No, it'd be nice to see that, yeah.
And it raises a question for me just about reading this chart. When you list the square footage, is that square footage attributable to the TDR?
So as you're looking at
I'm looking at the
receiver sites.
Floor area approved via TDRs and growth management competition 2001 to 2019. So I guess my question is that the
if it's
the total, or is that the just what's
if it's in the additional floor area category, it's just the additional floor area that's approved. So not, right on top of 5750. So not saying if it was 2500 that it's 8250. It would just say that it was a 2500 from that bucket of additional floor area.
Got it.
It would be nice to see it broken down, with the prior development approvals from pre-2006 at some point. I'll come visit.
The data's all broken out that way, so it's definitely, can definitely be presented that way.
I was looking for trends in your table of the extinguished, TDRs extinguished each year, and trying to figure out what if we can make any inferences about the times or the economy or whatever, looking at the trends of how many get extinguished each year. I wasn't able to draw any conclusions.
No, I mean, I do think it's interesting, we see a lot more of them being extinguished in the areas where you're not going through special review, the urban growth boundary, those locations where there isn't, we've sort of pre-approved those as receiver sites. So they're not, when they come in, they're going through site plan review, but not asking for permission to use the TDR. They have the right to use the TDR and are just site planning for that. So those are the ones you see, no approval, not applicable because they're sort of pre-approved receiver sites. So, over the last few years, we've definitely seen more of that, use up on Red Mountain for additional floor area.
Right. Right.
And then can you just help me understand the constrained sites, how that works and how a person comes in?
So to request a constrained site, so say just to compare with rural remote where you either have the right to develop or take the TDR off of the property. Any other areas, many of the zone districts, don't have that automatic right to a TDR. One of the ways they could get one is to come in and they'd submit an application, and the language in the code basically says, demonstrate that the site is undevelopable or severely constrained under the code. So, usually the ones we've seen, it's, steep slopes, wildlife habitat, may have scenic impacts, sort of all of those things. A lot of the ones we've seen sort of had a lot of overlapping issues related to them, but it does come to the BOCC for a determination that the site is constrained, and then the board has the discretion to determine how many TDRs are then would be issued to that property owner. So then the property is restricted against future development, and they can sell the TDR or TDRs off. We haven't seen many there. When we first did it, I think when you look at that table, there were quite a few issued, and then it's we haven't seen very many in recent years. People coming through that route, but it was basically a way to acknowledge this is just a site that just has too many issues related to it, and a way to get some value off of it. And pose that to the board rather than going through a denial takings, that kind of a process. It was more of a direct route. Let's if you're willing, just go to the board and you can make that request.
We kind of, it sometimes, it meant you could only build a little house, so it really wasn't totally constrained. Or, there were lots of discussion over some of the properties. Some of them were very clear and some of them were very gray. And I think people sat on them for a while wondering what to do with their property, and then when this provision came up, they're like, this is what I can do, because the takings process was getting very tedious. We go back and forth, and they'd have to come back and forth. We'd have to deny, and then we'd have to, so this gave people another avenue, and it kind of streamlined the process.
Yeah. It's just interesting that there's value even in the worst site.
Yeah, either that or it's called private property rights, and we were going to have to be spending a lot of money.
Thank you.
Okay. This is a public hearing. If anybody'd like to speak on this topic, now's
Oh,
your
Chris,
chance.
come on.
Come on down, like everybody. Not seeing anybody leaping at the opportunity.
And we don't need any action.
We even have a former commissioner in the audience.
Who remembers those constrained lots?
Okay, I'm going to close that and bring it back to the board. What else do we need to do?
There's no action needed. We
We
can
don't
go
need
to the
to-
next item.
We don't need to
Thanks
approve
for the
it.
update. Yeah.
Thanks for the heads
That
up.
is, it's always very
The update,
interesting.
Suzanne.
All right. Would you like
Always-
a pickle or a cookie?
Always a pleasure, yeah. Cookies have been going
I
around.
got
They only
cookies
made it
over
that
here.
A pickle or a cookie? Sounds like
Okay.
you're pregnant.
Oh, gosh.
We're gonna
Oh,
keep
God.
Great cookies, just say. Yeah, pass them around. These two might need a cookie to get
Right
through
before,
this.
right before they speak.
The only way we get
right?
through these meetings are with cookies. Okay, this is a resolution amending resolution number 38-2019, approving the Eagle Ridge LLC request to accept a 3-bedroom Hunter Creek unit deed restricted to Category 3 and relieve the applicant from the requirement to pay the $148,595.50 fee in lieu.
50
And this is a
cents.
more complicated than that long description, so looking for Leslie.
Can I ask, do we have either Peacock around or Ridge? Because I may have some questions in terms of some of these options for the county.
I can run up and see.
Okay, great. Well, in the
Of course, we
meantime,
have 700,000 people.
Leslie,
Yeah, it's-
explain
hi.
this to us, because at first glance, it's not quite what it appears to be.
Well, so I'm Leslie Lamont, for the record, Community Development, and this is Chris Benden, the applicant's representative. And in June of 2019, the BOCC approved via resolution a removal of an affordable dwelling unit. That's at the time that this was created, it was called an affordable dwelling unit. You approved the removal of a deed restriction from an existing 2-bedroom Category 1 unit. The deed restriction, and in lieu of that, the BOCC accepted a Category 3 buy-down unit and $148,595.50. 50 cents, cash in lieu, to mitigate the difference between the Category 1 2-bedroom and the Category 3 2-bedroom. And the replacement unit was subject to the marketability standards of APSHA. APSHA only wants replacement units as Category 3, and then they work with the applicant to make sure that the unit that the applicant has found meets their standards. So the applicant considered the units that were available, which there's not a lot, and they found a 3-bedroom unit, not a 2-bedroom unit, and it meets APSHA standards. So the applicant is requesting the BOCC basically to accept this 3-bedroom unit deed restricted as Category 3 and then waive this cash in lieu mitigation that was stipulated in Resolution 38-2019. Staff didn't feel comfortable amending this resolution as an administrative level review, so we wanted it to come back to the board. And as you know, as I kind of noted in my memo, when we originally did this in June of 2019, this went to the staff, housing staff took this to the APSHA board for recommendation. You had a recommendation from the APSHA board. Now that there are elected officials on the APSHA board, that's a conflict. So you only have a referral comment from Cindy Christensen, the housing staff, on this. In your memo, there are 2 charts in your memo that kind of explain how many FTEs, full-time equivalent, are housed in a 2-bedroom unit. What is the cash in lieu of an FTE, and the difference between the Category 1, Category 3, 2-bedroom unit, 3-bedroom unit. So staff is recommending approval of this 3-bedroom unit. It's located in Hunter Creek. And because it is adding a 3-bedroom deed restricted category 3 unit to the housing inventory. It is within the Aspen's urban growth boundary, which is Pitkin County's policy to locate these units within the UGB. And I'll turn it over to Chris, or if you have any questions for me or John Peacock.
I'll wait and
Okay.
listen to Chris.
Okay. Good afternoon. Thank you. Chris Bennon with Bennon Adams here representing the applicant. Happy holidays. I understand I may be the last thing on your last agenda for the year.
We have
so-
one more after you.
Okay. Be
Second
brief
to
as I
last.
can.
Take your time.
Yeah. So, as Leslie mentioned, when we left here
Okay,
last
you're done.
time, we were searching for a 2-bedroom unit to replace our existing 2-bedroom, thinking that there's hundreds of them out there, and we would have multitudes to pick from. Turns out that's not the case. There are hundreds of them out there, but many of which APSHA will not accept for good reason, because they don't like free market unit or affordable units within an otherwise free market complex, and they've had horror stories I'm sure you're well versed on. So APSHA provided us with a list of 5 units that they would accept, none of which were for sale. So Chris LaCroix and myself said, well, we're not going to go chase these people down because they'll probably get arrested. So we hired Justin Addison, who is a real estate professional with Caldwell. You may know Justin. So he tracked down these folks. He also looked at 1,000 units that are out there, everything in town, ABC, Snowmass, looking at Woody Creek, looking for an appropriate unit. One of the 5 folks did respond positively. It's perfect timing for them. We went under contract. We brought APSHA over to the unit. Leslie mentioned the marketability standards. So we made some upgrades to the unit, upgraded the appliances, new paint, new carpeting, fixtures, a bunch of little doodads. So it's all ready to go. In fact, Justin and Cindy were just trading emails about going and visiting the unit either tomorrow or Friday for a pre-listing, kind of walk through, make sure it's all fine. Cindy's been over there before. So we're kind of ready to go, but the unit that we found is a 3-bedroom instead of a 2-bedroom. And so we wanted to come back and talk about the cash in lieu. We came up with the same math that Leslie came up with, and hopefully that's acceptable to you, and kind of like to move forward on this.
So I'm not familiar with, about Hunter Creek, you've got deed restricting, you've got
Yes.
free
Yep.
market. And is there a difference in HOA dues depending on which buildings you're in?
That I'm not familiar with. What I do know is that there's a building, and I'm escaping me right now which building it is, Building 8 or Building 6, but that this building is in, and it is slowly migrating from free market to affordable, and it has a majority of affordable units in it now. This is a free market unit within that building, and has its own kind of HOA dues and so on for that building. So that is the reason that APSHA sees it as an acceptable unit, because it's kind of amongst its own.
Okay, because one of our concerns in the past has been to buy a one-off unit in a free market complex, and then, of course, it's gets very expensive for that occupant to have to pay those HOA dues.
Very aware of that. When I was at the city, we had some of those blow-ups, and they're really pretty ugly. But this is not one of those scenarios. This is a unit that is within a building that will, I would imagine, within a few years, if there's a couple more buy downs, will be 100% affordable. And it's one of the units that they have identified as on their wish list.
And so your request is to take this 3-bedroom and put it into APSHA stock?
Correct.
Okay, so then my question, John, is because there's a couple of different alternatives here if you see on a memo. So it could either, in terms of meeting the mitigation fee, we could accept that and let it go into APSHA stock. We could take it as a county stock, or we could take the cash and use that cash perhaps to help offset fill-ups. So
We'd have to buy it for the county stock.
So, yeah, and I apologize, I'm coming a little bit late to the conversation. So As I am understanding this, the applicant is buying the unit. The applicant would, I'm sorry, the owner would buy the unit. The unit would be deed restricted to Category 3. So the county or APSHA would not have ownership of the unit, but would have a deed restriction that runs to the benefit, and you guys could specify whether it runs to the benefit of the county or APSHA. I suspect that wouldn't matter. In this case, there is a benefit in terms of the number of bedrooms and FTEs that would be housed, going from a 2-bedroom unit to a 3-bedroom unit. It's a different category. I assume this would be in the rental stock.
APSHA preferred sale. We're agnostic. We've bought the unit. When we found this person, they said, "That's great. Thanks for calling. We want to close quickly." And so, even though we were approaching them, they wanted to close quickly. So we own the unit, and it's our job to get rid of it in a way that the community is most accepting of. So if it's for sale, that's what APSHA has told us. We're willing to go rental. We're willing to sell it to the county. Our job is to get rid of it.
Yeah. So in this case, George, I think the sale to the county, given the number of projects we have in our housing fund right now, would not be something that staff would recommend. The ability to have a unit within the core of Aspen has been more and more difficult as the economy's been good over the last 10 years. So I think if we were to take the mitigation fee, it's most likely that those dollars would be applied down valley rather than in the core. We do have some projects that we could apply the fee to, whether that be the infrastructure to support Phillips or any future kind of partnerships that we might do, like what we have with Basalt Vista. That said, I think generally staff believes when there's an opportunity to have housing closer to the core, where you can have more of a walkable opportunity with affordable housing near where jobs are and the demand is, that's something that's attractive. And so I think we would support ComDev staff recommendation.
So then my last question, would you consider it going to the benefit of the county or to APSHA?
Well, if you have the deed restriction run to the benefit of the county, this board or future boards has more discretion in terms of what might happen with that unit or deed restriction if, even though this development appears to be going the direction being affordable, may or may not. And so if there were a buyout of the deed restriction or such, in that case, that would go to the benefit of the county's housing fund versus APSHA. I always like you guys to have more discretion, so I tend to recommend to the benefit of the county.
Yeah, all right, thanks.
Are we looking at sale or rental? John, would we prefer sale of the unit to somebody, the deed restriction, or rental? And who oversees that management of that deed restriction?
So that in terms of ongoing administration, sales tend to be better. If we're in a rental profile, we are paying APSHA to support some of that now, but it tends to be in addition to what we're already subsidizing.
Right.
So, and Phyllis didn't kick me under the table, I don't think.
Because you sat too far away.
Make sure there isn't anything.
The other question I have then is, because it's a 3-bedroom, then that mitigates the mitigation fee of $148. Right. Because they've bumped it up a notch. I mean, I think having an opportunity, Hunter Creek is such a great location for people who work in the even in the Upper Valley, but especially in the way Upper Valley, and especially within the urban growth boundary or thereabouts. So, and I think if we can figure out where we want to go with the deed restriction running to the county and managing it for sale, which I think be easier for staff level. I think a rental would be great, but they don't really have a housing department within the county to manage all these deed restrictions. And I'm going to move so Phyllis isn't staring at me. But I think that should be part of the discussion as we move forward on this. If anybody wants to discuss it.
I'm just reading the APSHA note, the APSHA recommendation. It says, after conversations with the county community development, APSHA believes this is a decision to be made by the BOCC based on the county losing a Category 1 two-bedroom unit. However, the APSHA program would be gaining a Category 3 three-bedroom unit. So I'd love to hear what other people think about how we go about doing this.
If we looked at this when they first came in, for the gentleman had health issues, he needed, these various reasons for wanting to take the deed restriction off the one
The ADU?
two-bedroom unit there. And I presume that was so he could house healthcare workers who were, presumably that's what it was. This is really replacing that whole unit with a unit that has one more bedroom. It looks like totally a fair deal to me, without trying to dissect all the payment in lieu money. And if they had found a two-bedroom unit and paid the 140-some thousand, we probably would have been better off, because we would have had some money, a little bit more money in our housing fund. And I guess the only thing I don't quite grasp is a three-bedroom unit. It makes it 3 FTEs. And yet who's going to be using that extra bedroom is probably not going to be an employee. It's probably going to be a family member from a bigger family.
And just to comment on the Category 1 versus Category 3 that Greg brought up, and I think maybe part of what you're wrestling with. If you were considering it for rental, the Category 1 is probably feasible, but if we're talking about ownership, it is generally very, very difficult to find folks who qualify under Category 1 and can finance that. The Category 1 tends to be probably more sustainable in a rental product than a purchase product is part of what we found, versus Category 3 tends to have the incomes to support the not only cost of the unit, but the ongoing maintenance and that sort of thing.
Can I mention two things?
Sure, please.
One is we're agnostic on who holds the deed restriction. Happy to do whatever your preference is. The cash in lieu, the charts that Leslie referenced that are in her memo, I just want to point out that the cash in lieu difference is actually a little bit more than the 148. So when we did the math, technically it would be that we'd be providing you with a 3-bedroom and requesting that you pay us $37,000. That's not what we're asking, but I just want to point out that it over mitigates by a slight bit. And then last point, if you do prefer a rental, and you're not willing to take it on as an ownership yourself or APSHA, if that is an option to us, we could look for an employer that would want to take it on. We've thought just kind of internally that might be a low likelihood, because it would probably be something like the school district or the hospital or something, and they may not want kind of individual units all over, because it just kind of administration-wise, it might be a little kludgy for them. But if that's something that you want to have as an option and want to send us out with, work with APSHA to either sell it through the lottery or find an employer who wants to buy it as a deed restricted unit, 6 1/2. But there you go. We'd be willing to do that and explore that with APSHA and see if we find a buyer, and we either would or wouldn't.
Yeah, I'd like to, if I'd like to have it to the benefit of the county, then we have the flexibility down the road in terms of what we want to do with it versus turning it over to someone else. And does it say that in the resolution? It says under 10, BOCC, that it does hereby grant the amendment to accept a 3-bedroom Hunter Creek unit. So that means it's coming to the BOCC. That's on page 385 in the packet, under resolution number 10, now therefore be resolved. Do we have to, is that clarified that it's to the benefit of the BOCC, or do we have to state that specifically?
I think it doesn't say right now, so I think you'd want it to be clear.
Yeah, this is, it's.
I would suggest that as you get, I'm gonna let Ryan look it up, but I think it'd be good to specify the deed restriction and whose benefit it runs to in that paragraph.
Patty?
I would like it to come to the county with the deed restriction and have the county look at sale. Do we have to put in here that the first opportunity for sale would be to a county employee? And then we could open it up to anybody who qualifies under, can we do that too? Because we've been trying to locate, we've been looking at housing opportunities up here for county employees, especially those with, or, I don't know.
Yeah, we're all looking at each other because I don't think we've done that just with a deed restriction. We've done it with units that we have fee ownership of.
I guess if they're willing to provide us with the right of first refusal, the county could buy it and then sell it to a county employee.
So
with the deed restriction.
Yeah, the sidebar, just in case it's not heard, would be to give us a first right of refusal. Then we could buy if we decide to go that route. Otherwise, the deed restriction would apply, run to our benefit, and the unit would go to sale through the standard APSHA lottery process.
And that's still not something.
And that's kind of us thinking on the fly here.
That's out of their purview. That's into our purview as part of our deed restriction and how we want to apply it, and if for sale. Because I'm thinking, well, if we take this, the deed restriction is for sale to who, to whom, by how, what, to sale.
Well, so two different things. We've got the deed restriction, who it runs to the benefit of,
Right,
and that
to the county.
and that would be to the county as a condition of this approval.
Right.
Then, right now, ownership would transfer from the current owner to whoever buys it under the APSHA deed restriction. I think what we're talking is having an intermediary step before that would give the county the first right of refusal to purchase it and then prioritize. So we would have to come up with money then to purchase it at that deed restricted price, category 3 price.
Or let it go back into the
And then we could
APSHA.
provide it to our employees. Correct.
Or put it into our employee purchase program. No?
So no, because that, and I think, George, what you're referring to is our deed restricted program. That actually encumbers the property with another deed restriction. So we specifically we purchase all free market units and then deed restrict them in that program.
Kelly was up next.
Yeah, just help me remember what the impetus to go from category 1 to category 3.
That's an APSHA thing, and especially with for sale units, as I think it's been mentioned.
Well, sure, no, and I know that, but initially, because a category 1 would serve low income populations, a category 3 is not going to serve a low income population. So, I just want to acknowledge that, not that there isn't need in both categories.
Yeah.
There is, but
that was the
getting
direction
category
from-
1s is tough too. So I just want to understand where that shift came from.
Yeah, that was the direction from APSHA. I think that's probably changed over time. But I think, from what we've heard is that the for sale units in particular and the larger size units are really, that population is smaller. There's still demand, but that population is smaller than what you might find in a category 3 realm. But that's the APSHA science that they kind of brought to the table.
Phyllis?
Yeah, well, like Chris has said, it's really the for sale. If it's going to be a unit for sale, that's really the impetus for making it the Category 3. That's the likely purchase point.
Yeah. I get that.
If it was going to be a
So
rental,
there was just an assumption here that we would likely be more interested in a sale
Right.
property than a rental property.
right, and a rental, a Category 1 would be great, but that doesn't fit. And I know that APSHA would prefer the a sale. Now, the county does do rentals through APSHA, and we contract with APSHA to do that, so I don't know if that's one of the options. But I think as this transaction would get done, then it's to figure those pieces out.
So that's what I was going to suggest. So today, can we accept this with the deed restriction running to the county, and then figure out the details of the deed restriction at another time, or do we have to figure out all those details right now?
So I think you can, if you want to have an option to consider these options, I would do the deed restriction running to the benefit of the county and a first right of refusal for the county to purchase the unit, because we would have to still purchase the unit, and then you guys can dispose of it any way you want. You can remove the deed restriction, you can go to Category 1, turn it into a rental once you own it. But this is not ownership. This is having a deed restriction, which is a property interest that runs to the benefit of the county. So if you wanted to have that option open for the future, it doesn't cost us anything now, and it doesn't obligate us to have a deed restriction that runs to the benefit of the county and gives us a first right refusal if you want to reconsider how that's disposed of in the future. Does that make sense to you guys?
Yeah.
No, I'm still wondering, I thought we got the unit. They want to unload the unit. They don't want to keep ownership of the unit.
We'd like to unload the unit. You know, the way I think we entered the room, which
That's where I'm
would be
confused.
that we would deed restrict the unit and we would sell it through the APSHA lottery, right? They have a lottery, and then someone in the public is selected. They buy the unit from us. They buy it at substantially lower cost than we just bought it for, so that's our kind of subsidy. I
That
think in
clarifies
the
it.
model that John is maybe talking about, we would deed restrict it. There would be a time period that the county could exercise its right to buy the unit from us, and then we're out of the picture. We've provided our mitigation. The county could then decide that it wants to take various different routes that you could discuss. I think what we would want to do is make sure that we know what that time period is, and it might not be a first right of refusal, because we might not want to get someone set in a lottery, excited about buying the unit, and then have the county step in and saying, yes, but we're exercising our first right, so sorry that you won the unit, but you didn't really win the unit. So I think we would say, you know, look, is there a few weeks or a month or some sort of logical time for the county to say, yes, we want to step in and buy that unit, and then we'll decide what we want to do with it.
Can we exercise the first right of refusal at the next sale? So if we don't, why not? My homeowners association has first right of refusal anytime when the unit in the trailer court sells.
Is that right?
Yeah, it's not just the first time.
I'm going to look at Rye, because I'm
That's
not
a good
sure how
idea.
that.
Because I don't think we have the money now to
Right.
buy it, but we might in 5 years, when it comes up for sale again, we might have money to purchase it at that point. So I would like that first right of refusal to run.
I
with
think
the-
generally the answer to that is yes, but
I don't like
I
the
don't.
but.
Yeah, I don't know how that works within the APSHA hierarchy. As
Well,
far
let's
as
craft our own deed restriction and show after.
I think if we can establish a time frame for the county to make a decision, it doesn't necessarily have to come out of our housing fund. We also have special revenue funds that have budgeted to purchase housing for county employees. And this board still makes the decision about how those properties would be disposed. Now, in terms of if we bought with a special revenue fund, the housing benefit would need to run to that special revenue fund or employees within that special revenue fund. But you guys have multiple avenues. I guess my point is you guys could have multiple avenues to exercise that purchase. And then you can once you own it, you've got total control over the
Right, but I would like to look at what the opportunities might be for future first rights of refusal.
I understand what
Just
you're.
because that's a question we have here, and maybe that will be something we decide to do now. Let it go into the sale, and if it comes up for sale in 3 years or 5 years, when we can come back and revisit it, if that's the direction. I'd like to keep that opportunity open.
I understand what you're asking, and I'll figure that out.
So in the meantime, I think we should take it with the deed restriction running to the county. Yeah.
But we need to obligate a period of time so they're not on the hook for our decision-making lags.
John, how long do you think it would take us to make a decision whether to purchase it out of one of our other funds or whether to let it go on the market? If we have the right for first refusal in the future, that's tough to say.
I guess 30 days should give us more than enough time.
That's what I was going to suggest.
Hopefully, I don't think that jams anyone too much.
Yeah, I think beyond that, I think it might start to. I mean, there's some desire to kind of move this process along. The family is as you know, kind of exiting the Willoughby property and likes to, would like to tie this up. But I think at 30 days is a perfectly reasonable time period, and then otherwise it would just proceed with the lottery and be disposed of that way.
With the
wonder if,
holiday coming.
Yeah, if you lose a week at a holiday, I wonder if we should look at 45
30 days from January 1st.
End of January.
Well, when is this effective?
Chris, is end of January something that would, considering a holiday?
I'd like it to be
sooner.
I was thinking end of the year.
We can't do it by the end. We're done.
And I totally understand that, but we were anticipating listing it here starting, maybe next week, and we advised the client that, look, with the holidays, Action might not want to do a listing, on Christmas Eve and have everyone, no one actually see it. So, but I think if it were January 15th or something like that.
I was just going to say, I think by mid-January, this is going to be a quick vetting with departments to give you guys some options as far as special revenue funds. This, I suspect, Hunter Creek, Patty, as you're saying, it's an attractive opportunity. So I don't see why we couldn't be back with a recommendation and a funding source for you guys quickly.
So we'll set it for
January
January
15th is a Wednesday.
We have a Hunter Creek unit, don't we?
It's not, I'm
Do
sorry?
we have a Hunter Creek unit?
We do.
Was it a one-bedroom?
I believe it's a one-bedroom, and we have, it's a community member rented
Community member, okay.
unit.
Oh, it's a rental.
It's
It's
not a
unusual to
Pickens
get
County
three-bedroom
rented
Hunter
unit.
Creeks. I don't think there's not a
Okay.
lot of three-bedroom Hunter
Okay,
Creeks.
so January 15th is what we're thinking. Do we need to change the wording of this, or we can accept this as is?
No, we have to add some wording to it.
We're gonna have to modify this.
So
Wanna
somebody
take a
can help
stab
us
at-
with the wording?
Basically, what we need to do on the resolution is state that the deed restriction runs to the benefit of the county, and the county has first right of refusal to purchase to January 15th. So we have to say right now. And then Rye will look at, between now and then, Rye can look at the ability to follow up on Patty's suggestion.
So do we write that into this, or do we come back?
I wonder if you just write it in as first right of refusal, and then there's standard language in a form acceptable to the county attorney, and we can have a little bit of flexibility to work on the
Get
two
that,
issues
Leslie?
at the board.
Can you state it as a purchase option as opposed to a right of refusal?
I was actually about to make that exact suggestion, George. Stated as an option to purchase by January 15th as opposed to a right of first refusal. The concept of a right of first refusal running with the deed restriction going forward that Patty was talking about is something I can look into. The concept that, as I understand it, would be at almost every time that APCHA goes to convey the property, the county has the option to purchase that first before it goes out to into the lottery system. And I'll look into that and see if that's a possibility.
So we can write that language in. Should we write that into purchase options or first right of refusal per language acceptable to the county attorney?
Suzanne, and you got this written down, or?
But that's where we want to go with it. So that's how we want to.
I think we all know where you want to go.
That's how we're amending this resolution before us.
Okay.
So technically, the title of the resolution is still clean. So I could make, it's a.
It's a public hearing. I want to open it up to public hearing. Seeing no one else in the room, we're going to bring it back to the board, and I'll entertain a motion.
So I'll make a motion approving the Eagle Ridge LLC request to accept a three-bedroom Hunter Creek unit deed restricted to Category 3 and relieve the applicant from the requirement to pay the $148,550 fee in lieu, and with the amendments or changes made to the resolution as stated.
Second.
We have a second for the discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Chris.
Great. Chris, thanks for coming
you.
in.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
This is how we make Christmas sausage.
All right, one more to go. I just got a text message that says, with loud effect. What does that mean? It's gonna hoot and holler or something?
No idea.
I wouldn't know.
I'm not gonna open it, it's making me nervous.
Yeah.
But
Okay,
now I'm
Chris,
so
thanks for
interested.
coming in.
Okay, thank you.
We have one more thing here, and I believe Suzanne Wolf is ready.
Suzanne's day today.
Forwarding 2019 rural area residential
Thanks,
GMQS
Leslie.
scores for additional floor area.
I think you all are getting used to this little procedure we do for growth management since we've seen a lot of them this year. But so this is the first step where the P&Z has scored 2 applications in the rural area for additional floor area. So we are just forwarding their scores to you. Then we're basically within an appeal period if there were any appeals to that scoring. After which, then we come back with a resolution for the board to grant the allotments. So the 2 properties, one on just off of Snowmass Creek Road, the other up in Starwood, total of 6,000 square feet. If you remember, you did grant an allotment to the Hall property or Helvetica Endeavors on Castle Creek Road for just over 6,000 square feet, so there's still available allotment for these 2 additional applications. For additional floor area, we do provide 2 annual deadlines, so if it's not all used up on the first round, there's still some available. So these came in the July competition. And that's about it, unless you have any questions. So there's no action from you today on this. It's just forwarding the scores.
Just curiosity, what size are their homes currently, and then they're going to add another 3,000 square feet to each home?
I would have to go back and double check the existing sizes if they were, already exceed 5750. I'm not sure. I have a sense. I'd have to look. I'd be guessing. I think if I. But we can include that in the memo next time around.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, and I was gonna ask something about on the one for the Wilson Trust, under Achievement of Community Goals, it's reduction of visible mass, and they only scored a 3. So that means that they must have lots of floor area that's visible.
We have 3 different categories under reduction of visible mass. One is a height reduction, one is putting some below grade, and then I'm like totally.
Not building it.
Sorry, I just had a total
Okay.
blank on what the third piece is. But basically, in each of those, you have the option to get two points. So there was, some reduction
Okay.
in height, some putting, space below grade. Those are the kind of things that you get points for.
So it's scattered, because the other one was reduction of visible mass, they scored a 5, which was high when the max is a 6. So just that difference was,
I'd have
brought it
to
to
go
my
back and look
attention.
at the specific categories.
so we just need to say thank you very much and Merry Christmas.
Any other questions, comments, observations? Steve?
Well, I was looking at the Hidden Meadow subdivision, which is along Snowmass Creek, and initially I was thinking, well, why aren't they going for 2,500 square feet? But the house is probably not 5750 at this point. It's likely something smaller, and therefore asking for the 3,000 feet might put it, I don't know what square footage that would put it to, and I don't even know what the upper Snowmass Creek Caucus master plan
You know, they
has
don't.
for their house size limitation.
They
at this
don't
point.
anymore. I mean, basically, they're allowed 15. They would have the right to expand to 5750 today if they weren't there already. And so then the 3,000 presumably is in addition to either 5750, or if they already exceed that, would be in addition to what they have. But yeah, I can provide that when we come back for you to grant the allotments, what those existing floor areas are for both.
Suzanne, the other category for reduction of visible mass is final maximum floor area.
Okay.
Thank you. She's
Thank
gonna
you.
sleep
I
much
was
better
like,
tonight.
I'm like, there's something I'm missing.
You'll get her through the holiday
Thank you
now.
for answering that question for me.
Okay, any other questions? Thank you for bringing that to us.
Open discussion.
Okay, we're done with that one. We're going on to open discussion. Thanks, Suzanne.
you.
Anyone have something to add? Open discussion? See nothing from George?
We'll see you next decade, Suzanne.
That's right.
That's right.
Thanks for the treats.
Kelly made those.
And I had a little rhubarb cake too, so I'm all good.
I want to wish everybody the best holiday. I think we're all gonna still be in town. Is anybody leaving town in case John needs us? I think we're all around, aren't we?
I'm here.
You're here. We're here.
Oh,
Oh,
good.
well, John, we're all gonna be here. John's leaving, so I guess ho-ho. We're home and John's out of town, guys.
staycation.
Whoa, that could be dangerous. And I just want to say it was great working with everybody this year, and we're ready to take on next year.
Thank you,
God, what a
Patty.
fast year.
Yeah, I know, Kelly. How'd you do?
I know.
You tell me.
Amazing how fast
You
it goes.
did
You
great.
did great. Got a little uppity there a couple times, but we kept
And
it
Greg,
moving.
Greg
Thank
still
you very
has, he still has the opening of one meeting as chairman.
Oh, I get to
No,
to
he's-
assert myself one more time.
He's got work session and, because
The
then we have.
opportunity.
Session and then the opening that's the regular meeting.
What if I cancel that meeting? I could cancel that meeting, couldn't I?
And then you'd still be chair.
That's right.
No, I think we already made that decision.
quorum without the chair.
You put him
And then
in
we have to
place.
figure out our seating arrangements, right? And George and I are pretty
Just switch
comfortable
with
over here.
Steve.
This is always the hardest.
I'm pretty comfortable.
Yeah, that's the big, clearly they're tied to their side of the room.
Only if-
Okay, that's, any other open discussion?
We've been leaning in. a
Other than
different
seating
direction.
arrangement?
Yeah.
Rearranging the deck chairs of the sheriff and admin building?
Titanic.
I'm gonna very proudly make a motion to adjourn this meeting.
And I will second that.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Merry Christmas and
Thanks,
Happy New Year.
Grassroots. We are over and out. Happy Christmas and Merry New Year.
Thanks for getting us moved quickly.
Yeah, I was much earlier than I thought.
For us.